Do you know who he is?
No.
That's fine, but you know who this is.
Yeah, I know who that is.
Would you be interested in the nation's first Asian American president?
Shit, hell yeah. I'm Asian, right?
So you would vote for that person for sure?
Yeah.
Like, no doubt?
Yes.
Well, you're looking at him. This is kind of like...
Yeah.
You're kidding.
He's been doing literally every interview and press outlet he possibly could.
Thank you, Iowa. It's fantastic to be here.
How do you get a no-name young Asian man with no political experience, with no money? How do you get that person elected president of the United States?
Oh, shit. Sorry. I'm running for president.
Oh, running for president? How you doing, sir?
Yeah.
What is president for Charleston?
President of the United States of America.
Oh, America.
Well, you're the one running. God, I am really slow.
He is a 2020 Democratic presidential candidate and author of The War on Normal People, The Truth About America's Disappearing Jobs and Why Universal Basic Income is Our Future. That's all the time we have, ladies and gentlemen.
Let me introduce to you the next president of the United States, Andrew Yang!
Hello, I'm Andrew Yang, and I'm running for president as a Democrat in 2020.
This isn't a WWE event. This is a political rally for Andrew Yang, complete with pyrotechnics and a celebration of math and the song Return of the Mac.
Andrew Yang jumped into the presidential race with no political experience, but he outlasted 3 governors, 2 senators, and 5 members of Congress.
No, it's fine. That was my Rocky imitation. How'd I do?
You got some people here tonight who are excited that you're here, Mr. Yang. What do you call your followers?
Well, the Yang Gang's out here in full force. Thank you all.
Yang Gang?
As far as the eye can see, you don't look like the internet to me. You know what you look like? You look like human fucking beings.
Mr. Yang, it's an interview.
At some point in the next 15 minutes, you're going to talk about giving money to a whole bunch of people, right? We're going to get to that.
When I told my wife I was running for president, you know the first question she asked me?
Who are you?
You're right that most people have never heard of Andrew Yang, and I'm already polling at 1%, enough for me to make the debates.
First-time politician, Yang is doing surprisingly well.
Nationally, you're polling at about 2%.
A little higher than that.
Little higher than that.
Come on.
John and Hethel, feel free to follow up on this.
Of his party's presidential contestants, he's the cheerful doomsayer.
Seen here wearing a hat labeled with the thing that will cost him the election.
There was only one lapel pin tonight that said math.
In Andrew Yang's world, math stands for Make America Think Harder.
All these numbers and all this nerd shit. Listen, there's only one thing that wins elections in America, okay? That's fear and hate.
That's 2 things.
Okay, again, with the numbers.
23 people are running. Why you?
You are getting f***ed. And so if you want to help me on you, then vote me into office.
What's the quickest version of who is Andrew Yang?
Well, I'm not a career politician. I'm an entrepreneur and problem solver. And I'm running for president to solve the problems that got Donald Trump into the White House in 2016. He's our president because we automated away 4 million manufacturing jobs. We're in the midst of the greatest economic transformation in the history of our country, what experts are calling the 4th Industrial Revolution. When's the last time you heard a politician say 4th Industrial Revolution, Los Angeles? Just now, that's right. And I'm barely a politician. He just said getting there. That's the meanest things anyone said to me all day.
So you're a businessman from New York, like the President Trump.
No, please don't.
We already have a business dude in the White House.
Please don't compare me to that guy.
I'm just saying!
Entrepreneurs regard Trump as a marketing charlatan and a fraud, and not a genuine builder.
You said you are the complete opposite of Donald Trump. And the reason was?
Because you listen to the reason why. Because the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math.
Actually think the opposite of Trump would be a black guy who is a good president. There you go.
Okay, so you're Asian, you're running for president. What else is there to know?
My platform.
I don't see color. My staff tells me you're Asian.
Yes. Well, early on in my campaign, some people told me that an Asian couldn't win the White House. And those people were my parents.
Is that true? No.
To me, the government's responsibility is to solve the biggest problems and address the biggest needs that don't have any market incentive attached to them. If we were doing a better job looking out for our people, Donald Trump would never have come close to the White House, but here we are. You all remember that night in 2016, you had the TV on and you were like, holy shit, we're doing this thing? We have to acknowledge the depth and severity of the problems, but we have to have a new set of solutions. What were Donald Trump's solutions? We're gonna build a wall. We're gonna turn the clock backwards. We have to turn the clock forward. Right now, we have fallen into this trap where we have allowed the market to tell us what we are all worth. There have to be some things that are more important than money. And right now, essentially nothing in American life is more important than money. If you have human lives on one side and money, which wins right now? The money. Democracy, money, the money. Families, the money, the money. That has to change. The entire capitalism-socialism dichotomy is completely out of date. And the fact is, when people were talking about these economic models, they did not foresee technology getting stronger, more powerful, capable of doing the work of thousands of humans in the blink of an eye. What is the new way forward? The way forward is a new human-centered version of capitalism that actually uses the markets to improve our families' lives. The mission in this campaign has to be for us to disentangle economic value and human value, say they are not the same things, and make this case to our fellow Americans that we each have intrinsic value as citizens, as human beings, and as owners and shareholders of the richest country in the history of the world. So I'm running for president to help advance meaningful solutions, including $1,000 a month for every American adult starting at age 18.
Now, what is... Can I just say, of all the candidates I've seen on the trail, you seem to be having the most fun. Are you?
Oh, it's a very low bar you set, Trevor. Today I'm doing some captions for some New Yorker cartoons. Harold, the podium only makes you look more powerful on TV.
You're like out there, you've got like cool music, you're like rapping at like campaign events. It feels like Andrew Yang, you're having a good time whilst you're putting out your policy proposals.
I want to see Joe Biden try that.
I crowd surfed a lot as a kid. I grabbed Morrissey's wrist at one concert. I don't know if you guys know who Morrissey is. I went to the first 3 Lollapaloozas and stuff like that. So some people crowd surfed at the rally last night in LA.
You're having a good time out there.
Yes. It's time to grill.
You considered yourself a goth. In high school, what kind of a goth were you?
Well, I was a goth who didn't get tattoos.
How many tattoos of the cure do you have?
0. But I do have pictures of myself with a very Robert Smith-esque haircut. I was a very angsty teenager. I loved the Smiths and the Cure. And I think my fashion choices confirmed that I had no intention of ever running for president.
Yang is the son of Taiwanese immigrants and a lawyer by training, but he made his mark as an entrepreneur.
People think about Andrew Yang as a tech entrepreneur, but he's not.
Yeah.
He made money doing test prep.
The son of immigrants who achieved the American dream.
Because he went from the peanut farm to generating 65 US patents for GE and IBM.
Yang grew up in Schenectady, New York.
He attended the very prestigious Phillips Exeter Academy, receiving his undergraduate and law degrees from Brown and Columbia University, respectively.
My parents told me, get good grades, get a good job, so I tried to do that. I started a business that flopped. My business failed. My parents told people I was still a lawyer because, Asians.
He helped build a college test preparation business that was bought by a big company, and it made him a modest fortune.
I became the head of an education company that grew to become #1 in the US and was bought by a public company in 2009. And 2009 was a very tough time in so much of the country where the financial crisis had done a number. And I thought I had some insight as to why our economy had tanked. Here's the joke I used to tell. I went to law school. I was an unhappy lawyer for 5 months. When you say to your parents, hey, I'm going to go to law school, they're going to say, that's great. And the government will give you a $100,000 loan. And then if you say to your parents, hey, I want to be an entrepreneur, your parents will think that's stupid and no one's going to give you a $100,000 loan. So we have this huge oversupply of indebted, law school graduates and a huge undersupply of entrepreneurs. So I started this organization, Venture for America, to try and fix that. Venture for America is a 2-year fellowship program for top college graduates who want to learn how to build businesses and create jobs.
You guys are, in fact, champions of change. You're making a big difference in your communities.
He was named a presidential ambassador of entrepreneurship by the Obama administration and a champion of change.
That job took him across the Midwest and eventually led him to politics.
Imagine being a guy who'd spent 7 years running an acclaimed nonprofit and getting clapped on the back and getting accolades from the Obama administration, have a movie made about your org, and then you realize that your work is like pouring water into a bathtub that has a giant hole ripped in the bottom. I spent 7 years helping create thousands of jobs in cities around the country, and I came face to face with the aftermath of the automation of the manufacturing jobs. Detroit was a city with a peak population of 1.7 million. Now it is down to 680,000. And when you go to Detroit, you can see a thriving neighborhood in one direction. Then you just turn 90 degrees and you see desolation and despair as far as the eye can see.
And
Confirmed, he said. Then I was grappling with it, and I'm a parent like you are. And I looked at my kids and I was like, am I really going to bring them up in this shit show? Like, is this really the plan? Our kids are not all right. They are not all right because we have left them a future far darker than the lives that we have led as their parents. The fact is, 78% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, and almost half can't afford an unexpected $500 bill in the good times. The vast majority of the new jobs we're creating in this economy are temp, gig, or contract jobs that do not have meaningful benefits and often don't have a path forward. If you're a college graduate and you recently came out of school, there's a 40 to 44% chance you're going to do a job that does not require a college degree. And does the school come back and say, hey, we'll forgive your loans in that case? No, of course not. How many of you would agree with this statement? Americans have gotten less reasonable, less rational, less optimistic, and more subject to bad ideas in the last 20 years. Majority of hands are up. There have been studies as to what happens to your mind when you can't pay your bills. It actually constrains your bandwidth to a point that your functional IQ goes down by 13 points. That's like a really huge effect. Yeah. We're actually making our population more subject to bad ideas, nastier, more subject to things like racism and misogyny too, because it turns out what happens with most of us is you need executive functioning to resist like racist and misogynistic impulses. Right now, the myth is that we're a meritocracy. If you're smart and you work hard, regardless of your circumstances, you can make it. And then the numbers show that's generally incorrect. If you were born in the 1990s, you're down to a 50-50 shot of doing better than your parents. If you were born in the 1940s, that probability was 93%. So what we do is we get the boot off their throat. All of a sudden, they'd become much more reasonable, rational. If you say, hey, climate change is real, they'll be like, oh yeah, I really need to worry about that. Because you can't worry about a problem that seems like it's years away if you can't pay next month's rent. The freedom dividend makes the case to our fellow Americans that we all have intrinsic value as people, as citizens, as human beings. First, we eradicate poverty as a foundation, and then we start building a beautiful structure on top. If you have a country where 78% of us are living paycheck to paycheck, you put money into our hands, that legitimately grows the economy every single day.
But does it though? Because one of the
questions...
yeah, it does. Well, fine.
And then when you do lose your job, it's not an existential threat. And then you go home to a town, let's say it's a town in Missouri with 10,000 adults, there's another $10 million in discretionary spending in your town.
Why not start with representative or even senator or something like that?
I would not be running for president if I thought there was another way that we could actually advance meaningful solutions in the time that we have. Robot trucks may be on our highways in 5 to 10 years, so if I bided my time and tried to climb the ranks, in my view, we just didn't have that kind of time.
Why run for president as your first foray into politics?
Well, it wasn't my first choice, honestly.
Okay.
Now, my first move was not to run for president of the United States, because I am not insane.
I went to the Universal Basic Income Conference and showed up and was like, hey, anyone actually going to do anything about this? And I was like, no. We're just going to talk to each other about it. And I was like, well shit, that's not going to do anything.
I went to people in Washington, D.C. I was like, hey guys, what are we going to do? The answers I got were literally, number one, we cannot talk about that. Number two, we should study that.
We cannot talk about that.
That's verbatim.
Really?
Yeah.
And number three, we have to educate and retrain all Americans for the jobs of the future. All Only a Yang Gang rally would boo that shit. But you're totally right to boo it because it's total nonsense.
You all know how effective government-funded retraining programs were for the manufacturing workers in the Midwest? 0 to 15%. That's right, Yang Gang. That's a fail. That's a fail by any curve. Well, the fail chant. That's a new one. My parents are somewhere smiling. One of them gave me some guidance that led me here to you all tonight. He said, Andrew, you're in the wrong town. No one in Washington, D.C. will touch this because fundamentally this is not a town of leaders, this is a town of followers. In order for us to do anything about it, you're going to have to create a wave in other parts of the country and bring that wave crashing down on our heads here in D.C. And I said, challenge fucking accepted. I would never have thought of running for president if Donald Trump had not won in 2016.
Would you like to thank him? Would you like to take a moment now to thank him?
We talk as if Donald Trump is the cause of all of our problems. He is not. He is a symptom, and we need to cure the disease. If you watch cable news, why would you think Donald Trump's our president today? I know some of you are like, cable news, I haven't watched that shit in years. Russia, what else? Racism, Facebook, the FBI, Mitch McConnell, Hillary Clinton, emails, and I call bullshit. But I looked at the numbers, and the numbers tell a different story, Philadelphia. That's right, I did some fucking math. There's a straight line up between the adoption of industrial automation in a voting area and the movement towards Donald Trump in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa. And we automated away 4 million jobs, mainly in those states. That is why Donald Trump is our president today.
Oh my God, artificial intelligence, robots, that's your thing?
Yes. I find the robot horse makes me feel more secure about my manhood. It's a thinker.
It must be weird. One of your primary issues is something that's so scary, but also sounds so awesome, robot trucks, you know?
Yeah, certainly as a kid, you'd be like, ooh, robot trucks.
I'm still like that, yeah.
Well, a lot of it, Jimmy, is that we have to make ourselves excited about progress. And right now, robot trucks could be exciting for everyone if everyone felt like we were participating in the gains of the 21st century economy instead of being left behind. This is no longer speculative. This is not down the road. We're in the middle of the fourth industrial revolution already. They see what's happening around them. Their Main Street stores are closing. They see a self-serve kiosk in every McDonald's, every grocery store, every CVS. And if you go to a factory, you'll see it's just giant robot arms as far as the eye can see. So it's not just that you have artificial intelligence on the horizon. It's that we've been eating away at the most common jobs in the U.S. economy for almost 20 years now.
I want to understand the data on this.
Senator,
and
thank you very
I want to make sure we're responding to make this work.
Your time is up. I want to get...
Economists project 1/3 of American workers will lose their jobs to automation and technology in the next 12 years. The Obama White House, MIT, McKinsey, Bain all project that between 20 and 30% of American jobs are going to be lost to automation over the next 10 to 20 years. The Obama White House, literally like their last day in office, they issued a report saying, hey guys, we're going to automate away all the jobs and then, turn the lights off. 30% of America's stores and malls close, and the most common job in much of the country is working as a retail clerk or cashier. The average retail worker in the United States is a 39-year-old woman making between $9 and $11 an hour. What is she going to do when her store closes? Fred says she's going to cry. There will be tears shed. And now what we did to those jobs, we are doing to the retail jobs, the call center jobs, the fast food jobs. McDonald's is rolling out self-serve kiosks in every location in the United States by 2021. Yeah, they're getting automated away progressively. So we have some fun animations that illustrate some of these things that you've all seen and worked with and are very familiar with. This is a robot pizza printer. This is a picture of a robot pharmacist.
A recent automated medical procedure where they did surgery on a grape.
Yes. Yeah.
Did you see that?
Yeah, I saw that. And China's already had just a complete automated dental implantation. It's the lawyers. I did that job long enough to know that you can automate a lot of that job. Oh, you laugh. AI can edit contracts faster, more efficiently, more inexpensively than the best human lawyer at this point. Radiology and looking at tumors on a film. Because it turns out that AI can see shades of gray that a human eye cannot. When you call a big company, you get the customer service line. What do, Los Angeles? You dial 000, say human, human, human until you get someone on the line. Am I right? In a few years, it's going to be an AI that sounds like this. Hey, how's it going, Trevor? What can I do for you?
That's creepy.
It's creepy. It's going to be efficient, delightful, a little bit sexy, apparently. I have friends who right now are working on AI that's going to automate basic coding. So if you think about coding as like, oh, you'll always have a job with like coding, it's like actually that stuff's kind of automatable.
Is artificial intelligence, is there any chance, and I'm just asking for a friend, that they would do talk shows too? Are there talk show hosts in danger of losing their jobs?
You won't believe this, but they actually have a virtual talk show host, but they're primarily reading the news, not comedy.
Okay. That's worrisome.
It is going to hit about 2.5 million jobs annually. All those pins are major department stores that are set to close. The quote on the slide is, AI is the new electricity, which is a quote from a Stanford professor. How many of you all know a truck driver?
I know Fred.
They know Fred.
Hello, this is Fred.
For those who don't know, Fred's a truck driver who let me ride in his truck, and now he has my face on his truck. And it's something like, 50 feet long and 30 feet high, and it's like, whoa. Most people do not realize that trucking is the most common job in 29 states. There are 3.5 million truckers in this country, and my friends right here in California are working on trucks that can drive themselves. Why do so many of my friends care about self-driving trucks? For the most American of reasons, the money. The savings from automating truck driving are estimated to be $168 billion per year. They tell me they're 98% of the way there. What is that going to mean for the 3.5 million truckers in this country and the 7 million Americans who work at truck stops, motels, diners, and retail establishments that need the truckers to get out and have a meal? A year and a half ago, I said, hey, what do you think about robot trucks? They were like, impossible, never going to happen. You talk to them today and be like, hey, what do you think about robot trucks? They're like, they got to make those illegal. Many of the truckers actually took out massive loans to lease their cars, their trucks. So imagine if you owed $80,000 on a truck, and then you saw the robot truck hit the highway that never needs to stop. He's saying smash your truck into that truck. There's going to be a lot of passion, a lot of resistance to this. It's going to be much more likely that they say you need to make these robot trucks illegal, or they're just going to park their trucks across the highway, get their guns out, because a lot of these guys are ex-military. And if you look at the Industrial Revolution, which people cite as the precursor to what we're going through, there were mass riots. Labor Day is a holiday today because of those riots. And we're going to displace jobs at 3 to 4 times the rate of that Industrial Revolution. So even based on our own history, you would expect massive social convulsions, including potentially violence.
Anybody who can throw coal into a furnace can learn how to program, for God's sake.
Does he have that right? He does not. Well, one of the things I've said, Ari, is that someone who suggests that coal miners become coders is generally neither of those things. If you look at the numbers, 8% of Americans work in STEM fields, 92% do not. Coding is like learning a foreign language that you have to become expert in. And that's not a realistic recommendation for millions of Americans. So then if you say, hey, I'm going to retrain 500,000 truck drivers, for what? If you said, I'm here to retrain you, they'd be more likely to punch you in the face than sign up. Get like 8 punches for every 2 signatures. Have you been to a truck stop lately? You know what I'm talking about. You go walk around and be like, hey, I'm the government retrainer. The success rates were 0 to 15%. Half of the manufacturing workers that lost their jobs in the Midwest never worked again. When a politician talks about education and retraining, it's a lazy, irresponsible fantasy that they are selling.
Yeah, this is such a bleak forecast.
I'm like hanging out with the tech wizards of Silicon Valley, and I'm like, hey, we're going to automate these jobs, man. And they're like, oh yeah, we're going to automate these jobs. like it's, so it's not a mystery, and they're not bad people. It's like, hey, it's my job to like make stuff work better.
That sounds evil to me.
Well, they're not doing it deliberately. It's just like a repercussion of their work.
Got it. Okay.
And then if you say to them, would you like to give up a slice so that America actually is in position to share and benefit? You know what they say to me? They say, no one's ever asked me that before. So what we have to do is we have to give them, really, in this case, actually, we're not going to give them a choice. We're just going to make it happen.
Right.
But half of them are on board with it.
Are you at all worried that these tech giants will try to kill you?
They know that it's bad for everyone if people feel like the 21st century economy is leaving them behind. I've been endorsed by Elon Musk and Jack Dorsey and Sam Altman and some of the biggest leaders in technology today, in large part because they don't think that a society where people feel like they're being left behind is good for innovation.
Stop building the robots. Hit the off switch.
Or we just start dispensing the bounty as fast as possible.
You make it in America, we should be benefiting from that. Andrew Yang opened my eyes to this idea that he has.
In the face of these changes, we need to build a new kind of economy, one that puts people first. That is where my freedom dividend comes in.
No, he did not bring $1,000 for every family.
You don't know that, Craig. You don't know that.
UBI, which sounds like a bowel disease.
I didn't name it. It's one reason why we've rebranded it the Freedom Dividend.
The Freedom Dividend is a great name, too. It's like the Patriot Act. Like, it gets people excited. Freedom. We're all about freedom.
Who could be against freedom? My flagship proposal is a Freedom Dividend of $1,000 a month for every American adult starting at age 18.
You all remember the first time you heard about me in the campaign, how there's an Asian man running for president who wants to give everyone $1,000 a month. You remember that, Los Angeles?
And they're like, wow, $1,000 a month sounds too good to be true. That would be a real game changer.
The first time you heard it, you were like, ha ha, that's a gimmick, that'll never happen. But if you dig into it, you will find this is not an Andrew Yang idea. This is a Thomas Paine idea.
It's a deeply American idea where Thomas Paine was for it at the founding of the country.
This is a Martin Luther King idea.
Martin Luther King fought for it. And it is what he was fighting for every day up to the day he was assassinated in 1968.
Now, one of the answers, it seems to me, is a guaranteed annual income.
I had the privilege of sitting with Dr. King's son in Atlanta, and he said this was the vision that his father was fighting for. Milton Friedman, the godfather of conservative economists, was for it.
This is an Elon Musk idea.
I think ultimately we will have to have some kind of universal basic income.
We're going to have to consider new ways of thinking about these problems, like a universal income.
So did Richard Nixon for a time.
Yeah, Richard Nixon. And it even passed the U.S. House of Representatives twice in 1971. So this is not as radical as you might think. And 11 years later, one state passed a dividend where now everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked.
It's been in effect in one state for the last 40 years. And what state is that, Los Angeles? And how does Alaska pay for it? And what is the oil of the 21st century? Marijuana, that's right, Los Angeles. It's not marijuana, you were right.
That's right, technology, software, AI, big data, self-driving cars and trucks.
How does the Freedom Dividend work?
So the Freedom Dividend would be universal and opt-in. Here's the Freedom Dividend. If you opt in, then you're saying I prefer that to other stuff. The only people that might have to make a choice are people who are receiving direct cash assistance for things like heating oil or food stamps. And in those cases, virtually none of them are getting $1,000 a month right now, so this is a huge win. Well, I talked to a family here in Iowa, and what their frustration is that the better they do, the less they get in benefits. With the Freedom Dividend, if you get this $1,000 and you start working and doing better, then you get to keep everything you make.
What would you spend it on?
Beer.
I heard beer. We are at a steak fry. Rent, college, philanthropy. I like that person. Let's give that person some money.
Oh, he said start a company. I love that.
Sports activities, I like it.
That's what I'm talking about.
Paper towels?
Rent, paper towels, down the street, retirement.
We're going to spend it on the things that make our lives better. Daycare, car repairs we've been putting off, school loans, Little League sign-ups, making art.
A little bit of it's going to float up to the cloud. You know, you'll actually get your own Netflix account instead of just using your friend's password.
He gave several families $1,000 a month for a year to test out his plan. And we sent Ronnie Chang to find out how it went.
These people spend their UBI on college, groceries, and paying bills. What a bunch of idiots.
You guys could be in head-to-toe Supreme right now. Do you know what Supreme is?
No. If you give people $1,000 a month, they would spend it on necessities, with a few exceptions.
What else did you buy?
I
Chucky
took
joined.
improv classes, so I've been doing that for the last...
I've been giving $1,000 a month to families around the country for a number of months now. And one of them is here tonight, Kyle Christensen, who lives in Iowa Falls. Thank you, Kyle. Look at that. I thought you were up there, Kyle. I'm glad you're at the fancy table.
Mom was diagnosed with a blood cancer. She lost her job as a result. So now I look after her. Andrew Yang has given me and 9 other Americans $1,000 a month.
He said that after he'd taken care of some bills, he bought a guitar and was playing shows for the first time in years. For him, it was a guitar. For Jody Fassey in New Hampshire, it was car repairs. For Mallory in Florida, it was going back to school at the age of 68. This is what the freedom dividend would mean for us in real life. Social goals often are related to economic goals, where if you put more money into families' hands, you can actually do things like improve graduation rates, improve mental health, decrease domestic violence. When you talk about domestic violence, you know what keeps women in these situations? That they don't have any money. They can't freaking leave their house. I've talked to domestic violence survivors and victims, and they say this would be the best thing for women, because if a guy's a jerk, they'd be like, peace out, you know?
I mean, how's that going to improve their health?
How will it not improve their health? Dr. Oz. And it would mean healthier food. It would mean lower stress levels. It would mean more time spent with your kids. Studies have shown that your kids are healthier, better nourished, more likely to graduate from high school and get further education, and your worker productivity goes up. It does create opportunities, including in the arts, but also in entrepreneurship. And as you know, I'm a serial entrepreneur. We need to have more Americans being put in position to do the kind of work that they actually want to do. How many Americans would prefer to do something creative or artistic or coaching in their community or journalism or something that right now the market won't support? What I say to CEOs, and I've spoken to groups of dozens of CEOs, what's really bad for your business is when people don't have money to spend. Our economy functions much better when we have money to spend, where we can participate in the market, where businesses are responsive to us. We'll start more businesses. We'll be able to change jobs more easily.
Gotta pay taxes on that $1,000?
No, you don't.
How did you come up with $1,000?
It was proposed by a guy named Andy Stern and then studied by the Roosevelt Institute. But it does make sense on many levels because $12,000 a year is right below the U.S. poverty line. So it moves you up to that level. The freedom dividend actually was originated by a guy named Andy Stern, who used to run the biggest labor union in the country. And what he said was like, this is going to make us more exploitation proof.
If you give people $1,000 a month cash, they may not make the right decisions.
When Verizon, Coke, Microsoft, all those companies declare dividends, everyone's like, nice work. And you know what no one ever asks? What are the shareholders going to do with the money?
My initial knee-jerk reaction was, get the fuck out of here. Like, universal basic income, just going to give people money, they're just going to be lazy, nothing's ever going to get done. That's a terrible idea.
You can't just give people free money. That's the only reason people work. If I was getting paid without having to work, 你以为我会在这边跟这些白人做工？
我不同意. You can't quit your job on $12,000.
What do you say to people who say people don't just want a check, they want a job?
I'm going to ask the people here in the studio audience, how many of you think that if you were getting $1,000 a month, you would work harder? Oh, look at that. Virtually everyone. How many of you think that you would just hit the sofa and never get up?
They're like, we're on television, we can't raise our hand.
They have found, for instance, in some Scandinavian countries, that then people don't work enough or they don't want to work, they lose ambition. There's a negative effect to that.
Well, when I've looked at all of the studies as to what happened when people got money, only 2 groups worked less. New mothers who spend more time with their children, and teenagers who spend more time in school and graduate at higher levels. I don't think anyone here has a problem with either of those things. No one's going to quit their job on $1,000 a month unless they're in a truly abusive or exploitative situation, at which point they probably should be able to leave.
That will cost $3 trillion. Where's this money coming from?
The first thing is it's not actually $3 trillion. We're spending about $1.5 trillion right now on 126 welfare programs and Social Security. We're just going to say you're guaranteed $1,000, and if you're already getting more, then this doesn't touch you, you can keep your current stuff. So the $3 trillion actually shrinks a lot very fast because of the fact that about half of Americans are already getting various income support. So the real price tag is closer to about 1.8 trillion. For context, the entire US economy is now 20 trillion and the federal budget's 4 trillion. We all know that right now most Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. They're gonna spend it. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's gonna go right back into the economy. But putting buying power into our hands will build a trickle up economy and allow us to create hundreds of thousands of jobs. And then all of those businesses end up hiring more people, and then we end up getting some of the money back as tax revenues. There was one study that showed that if you were to alleviate extreme poverty in this country, you would increase our GDP by $700 billion. We're gonna save $100 to $200 billion on things like incarceration and homelessness services and emergency room healthcare. I was in New Hampshire and a prison guard said to me, this is a prison guard, we should pay people to stay out of jail because we waste so much money when they're in jail. So if you imagine a society where everyone's getting $1,000 a month, it's a great incentive to try and stay out of jail. And it reduces recidivism because when you come out of jail, at least you have, $1,000 a month waiting for you. But if you reduce our incarcerated population by 10 to 20%, I mean, that's billions and billions of dollars. And the way you get the last 800 billion or so is related to what we think is happening with AI and all these advanced technologies.
Do you put a tax on robots? Do you protect the workers? This is an honest proposal. It sounds funny.
Don't laugh.
No,
that's
it sounds
actually a
funny,
very good
but
idea.
How many of you noticed stores closing where you live in Los Angeles? And why are those stores closing? That's right, Amazon's like a giant black hole sucking up $20 billion in business every single year.
If there's one candidate you think would appeal to college students, it's tech entrepreneur Andrew Yang, seen here vowing to protect his voters from the tickle monster.
This is how they suck up money. This is the universal symbol for sucking up money. Apparently, if you do this for a little while, you get $20 billion a year.
How much did Amazon pay in federal taxes last year? Zero. So think about $1 trillion tech company
Amazon,
paying
those
zero
fuckers,
in
get
taxes. That's right.
It's Google, it's Facebook, it's Netflix. Netflix also paid zero in taxes last year. So these are some of the biggest companies in our society.
And I'm going to say that is not their fault, that is our fault. We have to be pretty fucking stupid to let $1 trillion tech company pay nothing in taxes. Am I right, Los Angeles?
Thank you for taking my question. I have heard both you and Cory Booker opposing a wealth tax. I have not studied how it has failed in other countries, but I have a sense on how it would in this one for 5 reasons. The first is it costs a lot to administer, and so it is an inefficient way to tax. The second is it's very hard to determine how much value something has unless it is just money. A third is it encourages people to spend instead of investing and building a business. A fourth is it taxes the same money over and over again and erodes the money you have to tax. The fifth is because of inflation, unless the wealth tax is shaped to inflation, it erodes the money that people have, putting the cap that gets lower, and there is no money to tax. And my question is a 2-part question. The first is, do you have any more reasons why a wealth tax would fail? And the second is, what kind of a tax would you decide to have that would not tax poor people more than rich people?
Wow, what a great question. We've set up a really easy to game system. Our most powerful CEOs just see government as something to walk around and just avoid. The argument I make to folks is that Jeff Bezos probably owns this building.
He doesn't own this building. In disclosure, he does own the Washington Post. It's a personal property.
So Jeff Bezos is worth $120 billion post-divorce. Let's say I ratchet the personal income tax rate all the way up to 80%. How much of that $120 billion are we going to get from Jeff? Next to nothing. Because Jeff is not dumb enough to pay himself $10 billion a year and then let us tax 80% of it. He probably pays himself some nominal rate while the vast majority of his wealth is in Amazon stock. Other countries have looked at this and said it's unacceptable that you have $1 trillion tech company that pays zero in taxes.
Every other advanced economy in the world has something called a value-added tax.
Canada, Germany, France, the UK, Sweden.
I don't completely understand what a VAT tax is. Can you explain that, like, really dumbed down?
What I'm proposing is we have a transactional tax on his $1 trillion tech company Amazon, and you take a toll as it's coming in, which would be the equivalent of hundreds of millions of dollars from Jeff. And then when he takes $1 billion out of his wealth every year and buys rocket ships to Mars, which he actually does in real life, that's not made up, you can look it up, you take a toll on that too. You can ratchet it up on things like artificial intelligence and yachts and luxury watches, and you can exempt things like diapers, milk, and toilet paper. Make it so that Americans who are just consuming things that we all consume just to live our lives are not paying more, and it's the folks that aren't going to feel it as much who are going to be paying much, much more into the system.
It's a tax on value transfers. One difference between a VAT and a sales tax is it applies to the means of production.
We put a mechanism in place where we, the American people, get our fair share, tiny slice of every Amazon sale, every Google search, every Facebook ad, every robot truck mile. Let's say we have self-driving trucks. How much tax revenue will we see from that? None. Because the beneficiary will be one of the trillion-dollar tech companies that doesn't pay any taxes. So what we have to do is we have to get in there and say, hey, we actually get a tiny toll of every robot truck mile so that we can harvest some of the $168 billion a year in cost savings from robot trucks and get it into our hands. If you did this, you would generate $800 billion plus in new revenue almost immediately, with a big up arrow attached to it. We need to wise up to the fact that companies like Amazon are very smart and moving their earnings through places like Ireland, where the American taxpayer will see none of it, whereas a value-added tax will make it impossible for them to sell to us without paying into our society their fair share.
You can't escape it. It's one reason why other countries have put it into place. The only reason the value-added tax not been on the table in America is because the companies have been lobbying the crap out of it to try and keep it off the table.
And a wealth tax makes a lot of sense in principle. The problem is that it's been tried in Germany, France, Denmark, Sweden, and all those countries ended up repealing it because it had massive implementation problems and did not generate the revenue that they'd projected. Many wealthy Americans do not want everyone in the public to know exactly how much they have. What you'd see is Americans would get divorced from their spouses so they'd get below the income threshold. You'd see people, in some cases, even renouncing their citizenship, because you have to ask yourself, if you are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, would you rather pay $10 million a year to be an American, or would you rather go to Canada or some other country and say, hey, guess what? How would you like a really rich person?
You don't support a federal minimum wage.
That's not correct. I do support a higher minimum wage.
But not a federal one.
I support a higher federal minimum wage. I think no one should be working full-time in this country and be poor. To me, the issue is that if you just raise the minimum wage, there are going to be some businesses on the margins that have a hard time bearing those costs.
If we have a dividend of $1,000 a month, it's an effective raise of $6 an hour.
Instead of coming out of small business owners, this actually helps small businesses because we all have more money to spend.
You're able to work, we have a job for you.
Oh my gosh. Where do I start? I am for the spirit of a federal jobs guarantee, but you have to look at how it would actually materialize in practice. What are the jobs? Who manages you? What if you don't like your job? What if you're not good at your job? The fact is, most Americans do not want to work for the federal government. And saying that that is the vision of the economy of the 21st century, to me, is not a vision that most Americans would embrace. Studies have shown that in past programs, people who've been in that sort of government jobs program have been unable to transition to private employment because private employers don't regard that experience as valuable. Now, federal jobs guarantee does nothing for parents, nurturers, and caregivers. And to me, that's some of the most important work that any of us are doing.
How does this not inflate our debt?
You all remember voting for the $4 trillion bailout of Wall Street during the crisis?
No.
No, none of us voted for it. Yet that's what happened, and there was not rampant inflation.
What about people who might say, hey, everyone's got $1,000 extra, so I'm going to charge $1,000 more in rent every month?
Well, it's hard to gouge us like that because we're still price sensitive. We're still budget conscious. This income goes with us wherever we live. So this actually makes us harder to push around, not easier.
Republicans might just come back and say this is just, another socialist redistribution plan.
Universal basic income is not socialism. It's capitalism where income doesn't start at zero. So this is very pro-growth, pro-market, and pro-consumer.
And then if you were to get technical and very Asian and smart, you would say the definition of socialism is when a nation's government takes over the means of production.
That would be the government says, hey, we now are going to take over Google. That is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the next form of capitalism.
Why not just set a threshold?
If you look at the Alaskan experience, everyone's getting the oil dividend from the poorest Alaskan to the richest. And because of that, it's universally popular. There's no stigma attached to it. It's not like I'm paying for it, you're getting it. You don't need to monitor people's circumstances. You'd get it too.
They would price you out. Hey, look, trust me, I would not have had you on the show if I was on the outside looking in on the Yang plan.
You too? You need it, I know.
I got my eye on these Tom Ford cufflinks.
And so the joke I tell is that if we get hundreds of millions from Jeff Bezos and then try and send him $1,000 a month to remind him he's an American, that's not something we should be concerned about.
I met Jeff Bezos and I didn't think of just saying, can I have some of your money? We don't think of these things.
Yeah, maybe we should have asked him. There's nothing stopping the majority of citizens in a democracy from voting ourselves a dividend. But we do need to have separate plans to bring down the costs in education, healthcare, and housing, because those are the three things that are driving Americans crazy right now. And they're not going up in price because we're doing so well. They're going up in price because those markets aren't functioning properly.
We have to evolve in the way we see ourselves and our work and our value.
We have to broaden our definition of what work is. My wife is at home with our two boys, one of whom is autistic. And what is her work every day included at in GDP? Zero.
Zero, we know that's nonsense. We know that's the opposite of the truth, that her work is the most important and challenging and vital work that's being done in our society today. How about caregivers taking care of ailing loved ones? Also zero. How about volunteers and activists trying to make things better in our communities? How about coaches and mentors investing in our kids? How about most artists?
Your work also valued at zero right now, running for president?
It probably is. Right now, our country is beating us over the head with three big numbers. What are they? GDP, headline unemployment, stock market prices, right? So I'm just going to quickly trash each of them because they're pretty much garbage. GDP, even the inventor said 100 years ago, this is a terrible measurement of national well-being. We should not use it as that. If you remember Donald Trump when he was running for president 4 years ago, he said that the headline unemployment number was fake news because it masks the fact that millions of Americans have dropped out of the workforce and stopped looking. He was actually right. The labor force participation rate has fallen to 63%. Close to a multi-decade low in the same levels as Costa Rica and El Salvador, as some international comparisons that you do not want if you're in the United States. The bottom 80% of Americans own 8% of stock market wealth. The bottom 50% own zero. Why would you have a measurement that corresponds to the top 20% of your population and treat it like it's 100%?
A record high GDP. You know what else are record highs in this country? Suicide. Depression. Stress. Suicides, drug overdoses. It has gotten so bad that our life expectancy has declined for the last 3 years.
You all know the last time our life expectancy declined for 3 years in a row? You have to go even before World War II, I think. You have to go even before the Depression, the Spanish flu of 1918.
A global pandemic that killed millions. We are back in Spanish flu territory because drug overdoses and suicides have overtaken vehicle deaths as cause of death in this country.
It is actually highly unusual for life expectancy to decline ever in a developed country. That is not normal. Ordinarily, life expectancy will just keep creeping up if you're a rich, advanced, developed country like ours. Going down 1 year is highly unusual. Going down 3 years in a row is a catastrophe. So you have to ask yourself, are the measurements wrong, or are we actually prioritizing this production number over the lifespan of our people? We're the most unequal country by many measurements in the history of the world. So we need to start using different measurements to try and drive our economy and society forward. Yes. And one of my mandates as president is I'm going to update the numbers so they actually make sense to the American people.
Yes. So we can know what's going on. Otherwise, you can't make wise decisions.
If you don't have the right measurements, you will never make progress.
You think that we need to judge economic health on happiness. Is that an accurate distillation of the way you think?
It's not quite happiness, but that's essentially right. As your president, I'm just going to go down the street to the Bureau of Economic Analysis and say, hey, GDP, 100 years old, kind of out of date. Let's modernize it.
What do we have to do to actually make it something you would care about?
You know, before we came up with GDP, the way we measured our economy was we would do things like count the kids in the poorhouse.
How about your mental health and freedom from substance abuse? How about your health and well-being and life expectancy? How about clean air and clean water? How about how our kids are doing?
I'm very behind the idea of how bad a viewing experience the State of the Union is. This is something you agree with. Yes?
I completely agree. It's gotten bizarrely unwatchable.
Yeah.
The State of the Union right now is this bizarre theater performance. How many of you checked out and stopped watching that? Yeah.
So my plan is to take the American scorecard with the real numbers of how we're doing and then present them to you, the American people, in a PowerPoint deck every year at the State of the Union. I'll be the first president to use PowerPoint. Hopefully that's a good thing.
Yes, the PowerPoint chant. Yeah, the PowerPoint chant is out. This is the nerdiest campaign in presidential history.
Well, it's about damn time the leader of the free world stood in front of Congress and said, "My fellow Americans, does anyone have an HDMI cable?"
I can't imagine PowerPoint's polling quite as well as $1,000 a month, but I like your moxie.
Why are you the only candidate who's thinking through what to do about this? It gets kind of weird.
I think it's weird. One of the reasons I'm running for president is to push this into the center of the mainstream agenda.
You told me 3 months ago that we would have an extended conversation in any debate here on planet Earth about universal basic income, and that Andrew Yang would be driving it. Look, no one knew who this guy was at the start of the year.
What was it like for you at that first debate surrounded by lifelong politicians?
Well, I was joking that the debates got easier when I realized it wasn't really a debate.
What do you think? I don't know. What was I thinking, indeed? But I'm a fast learner. Yeah.
Preparing for the debates next week, and we have a surprise plan for the country that we think is going to blow people's minds.
He gave away cash.
My campaign will now give a freedom dividend of $1,000 a month for an entire year to 10 American families. If you believe that you can solve your own problems better than any politician, go to Yang2020.com and tell us how $1,000 a month will help you do just that.
Like a radio station contest. It's $1,000 Thursday.
Mayor Pete Buttigieg.
It's original, I'll give you that.
That might be the most ridiculous proposal I've ever seen on this network, and I've watched every episode of The Bachelorette.
Well, I just, I admire and frankly take joy in hearing people with innovative ideas.
We got over 1 million in donations, most of it from new donors in the 72 hours after the debate.
Oh, wow.
And in the 72 hours that followed, they received 450,000 entries.
The American people are speaking.
If you think my candidacy is going well, I'm literally giving free money to people and I'm still in 6th place.
Next.
Why haven't you hit none of the other Democratic candidates with the zingers yet?
No, we gotta wait until the field shrinks. I'm Mr. Positive until then.
Ooh, so when it gets down to about 4 or 5.
There are now 15 Democrats running in the primary. That's so many people. Look at all those faces.
Michael Bloomberg and his $50 billion filing paperwork to enter the presidential race. What do you think of that?
It's probably going to change the price of advertising.
Other campaigns are plateauing or contracting while we are growing quickly.
One of the most hyped presidential candidates is ending his White House bid, and another who was completely unknown a year ago is hitting his stride.
You're seeing voters come out for us in record numbers. We're having a giant rock concert in Iowa.
This footage of Yang skateboarding, which is an effective way of showing how good Yang is at skateboarding, and even more effective at showing how sparsely attended his rally is.
Apparently we've set a record for the season in terms of number of people at a political event in this library. We had an event at a union hall, and they said that it was the biggest crowd they'd had of any candidate this cycle. We've had standing room only crowds in early state venues, and we've even had to turn people away. How many of us are here today? What's the official count? I'm going to give a Trumpian number. There are 5 million people here today.
A slow and steady rise in the polls. You got a national poll. You came in at 8% today.
Presidential candidate Andrew Yang holds the 4th place spot among California voters. That means, by the way, that he is beating fellow contender Senator Kamala Harris in her home state.
Do you think you're being taken seriously enough?
It's all fun and games until Andrew Yang passes you in the polls. We're about to close out Q3, and we've got some news for the world. Because they're looking up, they're saying, hey, Andrew Yang, his campaign, really interesting, raised $2.8 million in Q2. We're about to blow that figure out of the water. We raised $2 million in the last week alone.
Andrew Yang posted the largest percentage gain in fundraising amongst all Democrats to report so far.
When we put up that $10 million number, Virginia, there was a tremor in the political world. They said, what just happened?
Yes, Bernie's got the most money, but hey, wait, he's not there. Even though he raised $4 million more than Cory Booker, they decided to go with Cory Booker on that. You can also see on CNN, they did effectively the same thing. And this graphic, they fit in one more person, but not one more Yang.
People hadn't heard of you a year ago, then the Washington Post actually called you Random Guy. Andrew Yang.
I do think the hashtag Yang blackout is something that was real, but
I am a numbers guy. I agree. Our numbers.
Online, a lot of your people feel like there's a conspiracy to keep you invisible. I deleted one tweet with your name in it, and I got just killed. Like, why are you trying to erase it? So,
Let Yang speak.
Yeah.
You know, there was this one segment where they literally got my first name wrong. They called me John Yang. The graphic actually said John Yang.
John Yang living his best life.
And I had to say on that one, I was like, why do I feel like this would not have happened to most other candidates?
CNBC, hear you as Yang, but they put up a picture of a guy named Jeff Yang instead of you.
If I didn't want to attend an event and he went,
Tonight was the 5th Democratic debate.
We were waiting a little while to hear from you.
They didn't get you till 32 minutes in.
Yeah, it was quite odd.
We also want to welcome Andrew Yang, who I can already tell is mad he hasn't talked yet.
No, not at all. It's me, Andrew Yang.
Run it! Run it! He's finally talking. Shut up. They let him talk. Finally, look, he's talking. I got one guy. Talking. Just let me listen to him. Oh, shit, he's talking. This is so exciting.
The Andrew Yang supporters are angry that their candidate didn't get to talk very much last night. Joe Biden supporters are angry that theirs did.
2 hours, you only got to speak for about 6.5 minutes.
MSNBC, hands up our democracy.
At first I was like, when the hell are they gonna fucking call on me? There was one point I literally just had both hands up. The hypocrisy of MSNBC, frankly, is just making us stronger and stronger.
Was asked to appear on MSNBC this weekend and told them that I'd be happy to after they apologize on air. What exactly do you want an apology for?
Americans tuned in to the debate earlier this week, and they saw that I got called on less than any other candidate, including candidates that I'm polling higher than. And the questions I did get had virtually nothing to do with the core ideas of my campaign. And if this were an isolated incident, that would be one thing.
MSNBC has left Yang off graphics at least a dozen times.
It's not about me, it's about the 300,000 plus Americans who've donated to and support my campaign. Think about those people donating $10, $20 of their hard-earned money to put a candidate on the stage and then have MSNBC virtually ignore me for 32 minutes. When they tune into MSNBC to see how we're doing in the polls, it's like I don't exist.
Seems like a small story, but it's not. It's actually a huge story because it goes to the mindset of the mainstream media.
Big picture, the media's treatment of us, I think, has been colored by the fact that they just didn't know what to do with me.
So Andrew Yang, if you want more media attention, you gotta take it, man. The next time you get up on that stage, make your 6 minutes count. Just come out on stage and be like, elect me and I'll make it rain every month. Universal basic income for all you universal basic bitches. This shit's gonna work and you can trust my ass because I rolled with Barack Obama.
Here's the math. You've spoken after 4 debates for less than 30 minutes.
Sounds about right. If you don't feel like you got your question answered tonight, it's understandable. There are 12 of us. I'm going to be answering voter questions for 10 straight hours this Friday.
I feel like you're gaining some traction.
Oh, definitely, Wolf. We've had over 10,000 Americans already submit questions for my AMA on Friday, and we raised almost 500,000 in the hours after the debate. Hi, Leah. This is Andrew Yang. I'm calling from our live stream.
Oh my God.
Today, something creative and grassrootsy, a 10-hour online Q&A, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, Quora, you name it.
I like to think voters have actually gotten their questions answered more thoroughly in this context than by turning on a debate. As a full-service presidential candidate.
First of all, he's doing whippets totally wrong, is what I'm told by the bad people.
I filled Kristen Bell's mouth with whipped cream. Literally a week later, I see this. He's filling a supporter's mouth with whipped cream. That's not a coincidence. I'm on to you, Yang. So if you're watching this, I would like an explanation.
No matter whose idea it was, Ellen, I think we have a gift for everyone here, which is some whipped cream for you all to take home.
Oh! Everyone's getting whipped cream.
Thankfully, a member of Yang's staff stepped in before he whipped out the mouth cream again. Okay, that, my friends, is the kind of leadership America needs. Finally, a man who knows where to draw the line. I'm ready to endorse Big Coat Guy 2020.
It's objectively hilarious. That was funny. It's a nice coat. It's cold out here. I'll wear a big jacket. But I will say we interrupt Big Coat Guy.
First-time voter says he's undecided, so
I'm going to work on you.
Oh, and go ahead.
You can only vote for a candidate who has answered a question personally.
Thank you. So you're
Friends in high places.
higher, that's for sure.
Sweetest Yang is Andrew, baby.
Karen, did Amber force you to do this?
No, she gave me $1,000, just like Andrew Yang will.
It is This Week in Unnecessary Censorship.
So, do you guys each other?
No. Has Elizabeth Warren always been your candidate, or did you ever think about doing a Yang bang?
That's great. Sir, we have to bring your daughter everywhere we go.
Let's talk about some non-UBI topics. Every debate that I've seen...
Ken Dorian comes up the East Coast. How do you handle that national emergency?
Well, I keep my Sharpies in my desk, for one thing. We all know who gets punished the worst when there's a natural disaster. It's poor people, it's people of color, it's people that don't have the resources to literally move to higher ground or get in a car and drive away. And so the freedom dividend will help a little bit, but we need to invest tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars in trying to make our communities more resilient for the ravages of climate change. I mean, you guys see what's going on out west with these wildfires? That's climate change. How many of you all are concerned about climate change? If you want to raise your hand on this. Yeah, everyone. If you don't hand up, you definitely should. Was there anyone? I see you. He's not that concerned about it. We'll work on him. I think there's a growing consensus around the urgency of climate change. It's the clearest existential threat to our way of life and our entire species.
The first thing I would do is rejoin the Paris Accords. We need to let the world know that the U.S. is open for business when fighting climate change is concerned. We want to be the leader.
Biggest externality facing us right now is carbon emissions. If I'm a company and I pollute, that doesn't cost me, that costs everyone. My campaign is built around updating our economic measurements. And one of the elements of my plan is for large companies to actually have to measure their emissions and then not just pay a carbon tax, but also take into account their impact on people aside from their shareholders. So I would zero out the billions and billions of dollars of subsidies that are going to these fossil fuel companies that are way, way past their sell-by date. I would take those subsidies, move them to wind and solar, and then I would put a price on carbon immediately so that polluters actually have to pay into a system that will help reduce emissions.
Would you eliminate some subsidies for fossil fuel or all subsidies?
I'd get rid of them all. I mean, why would you leave any of them there?
Companies can be trusted to do the right thing for their bottom line. And if you have to invest some of those billions of dollars in some of the energy sources of the future, that's what you should be doing. You should have done that decades ago if you had your acts together. So, don't time it with it. And if we take that same level of energy and put it towards renewable forms of energy, updating our infrastructure, making progress on climate change, we can actually create tens, hundreds of thousands of new jobs. This is going to sound so politician-y, but I was just with this entrepreneur, Ned Reynolds, in New Hampshire, and he now has 260 solar installers working for him. Those are the kinds of jobs we need to be creating in very large numbers. It's 10 years too late to keep the Earth from warming. Greenland just came out with a study saying that their ice pack is melting at the rate projected in 2070 today. There's a proverb that says the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, the second best time is now. So we have to stop thinking that if we do less of the bad, it's going to work. We have to do more of the good. So we need to reforest, we need to reseed our oceans. And I know for a fact Elon wants to work on this.
Does that follow with a thing about how we're all going to drive electric cars?
Because they're awesome.
Will you lead by example and order an electric presidential vehicle?
Whoa! Wow.
Yes, I will, and I'll go even better. The entire White House motor pool will be electric.
All right.
We're spending $750 billion that we know of on our military industrial complex every year. And I'm going to share a story that I heard secondhand, so I can't verify it. But there was a Top Gun, a fighter pilot, who said that his least favorite time of the year is at the end of the fiscal year because he flies over the Pacific Ocean and dumps oil into the ocean. Now, why is he doing that? Because they have to use all the oil that's budgeted, or else they won't get the same amount budgeted the following year. We have to take some of the $750 billion and start channeling it towards our infrastructure. To me, safe drinking water is a fundamental human right, and that if you're an American, you should not be stressed out about the water that you are drinking, your kids are drinking. And this is, again, the problem with having the almighty dollar running our society, where people look up and say, oh, replacing the pipes is expensive, or, oh, another substance would be more expensive. Are you kidding me? You know what's expensive? Poisoning our kids.
Yes. Proposed something that not a lot of people have heard of, which is this thing called thorium.
Thorium is a next generation fuel for a nuclear reactor. Thorium is superior to uranium as a fuel source on many levels. One is it's not intrinsically radioactive on its own, so that's great. Two, you can't make weapons out of it. If we get it right, it could be a tremendous boost in moving us towards more sustainable forms of energy and like reducing our reliance on fossil fuels. And I do not know why other candidates are shying away from nuclear. I mean, other countries have been using nuclear power successfully for a number of years to reduce their emissions. If we're in a crisis, which we are, then you have to consider every alternative on the table. First, you have to get your own house in order and try and move towards more sustainable forms of energy. Second, we need to make it more compelling for other countries to adopt. So we have to go to the rest of the world and say, look, that coal-burning plant you have, we've got wind turbines for you. We've got solar panels. This has to be a global competition where we make it easier for the rest of the world to go green, because other than that, all of our straws and recycling and composting will not do the trick.
I'm going to take it a step further. I propose a constitutional amendment that makes it the responsibility of the United States government to safeguard and protect our environment for future generations.
To stick up for Tom. We have a broken campaign finance system, but Tom's been spending his own money fighting climate change. And you can't knock someone for having money and spending it in the right way, in my opinion.
Thanks, Andrew.
No problem.
Oh, Yang2020. Everyone gets $1,000 and a compliment. I love it.
Cliff, I'm a sophomore here at Georgetown.
I see you got dressed up, Cliff.
Yeah. Well, you're not wearing a tie, so.
Oh, snap.
I like Andrew Yang a little bit.
What do you like about Andrew Yang?
He wasn't wearing a tie.
Yeah. Would you wear a tie for official business as president?
If I thought it was helpful to conduct official business, of course. I don't hate them as much as people make out.
So what else can I tell you that's like inside scoop inside baseball? The secret weapon of the campaign is about to be unveiled. Yeah! Secret weapon! And that secret weapon is my wife, Evelyn.
When he went on the first debate without a tie, I actually went and bought some ties. And I said, okay, just take these with you in case you change your mind.
And if you think I'm a badass, whoa, wait until you see Evelyn. America's gonna be like, we need to elect Andrew Yang just so we can have her as the first lady.
Evelyn is like a notorious bargain hunter.
Very value conscious job.
Very value conscious. Oh my gosh.
When you met, you have said that he had no game.
Yeah, she did say that.
I definitely married up, Fred. No, it didn't take you to point that out. Everyone was on that. I wonder you thought I was making Evelyn up for a while.
Why Halloween, though? You know, like
Oh, you kidding? It's Evelyn's birthday, and one of our boys is born on Halloween. So it's like the double birthday plus Halloween extravaganza celebration.
Yang refers to his wife as a superhero. Together they have 2 sons.
You have 2 beautiful children. Christopher, your older son, is on the autism spectrum, and you talk about that, and you hope to help other people. How did that diagnosis change your family and change just the way you think about things?
And at the time, we didn't know that we were dealing with special needs. So it just seemed like we were really incompetent parents. You know, for far too many Americans, they're faced with this reality and they don't have the resources that they need to get their child the support that he or she needs. And it's been really important for us to kind of share our story and just spread this awareness so that people know that it's much more common than you think.
To me, being neurologically atypical is the new normal. And we need to start recognizing that in our society. How many of you have someone in your family or community with special needs or autism or is neurologically atypical? Look, just about every hand went up.
Why is it so important to you both to talk about your son?
It would never occur to me not to talk about our son. Do I sound like a parent?
No.
Yeah.
We could go on and on about our kids.
Evelyn Yang, the wife of Democratic presidential candidate Andrew Yang, revealed for the first time that she was sexually assaulted by her gynecologist when she was pregnant with her first child back in 2012.
I was confused, and then I realized what was happening, and then I just kind of froze, like a deer in headlights.
Was
just waiting for it to be over.
She decided to go public now after being moved by stories from voters she met on the campaign trail.
An attorney now representing dozens of former patients say this man, Dr. Robert Haddon, could be one of the most prolific sexual predators in New York City's history. In 2012, New York police first arrested Haddon. Prosecutors didn't file charges, and Haddon returned to work at Columbia University's medical clinic for more than a month. That's when he allegedly assaulted at least 2 more women, including Evelyn Yang.
What happened to me should have never happened. He was arrested in his office, and he was let back to work.
She took her story to the march in New York as well.
You might have heard that I'm standing here today also as a survivor of sexual assault. There are far too many of us. So you see, for me, the theme of this march, to rise and to roar, it's very personal.
Since Evelyn Yang told her story on CNN last month, her attorney says dozens more former patients have come forward saying they too were assaulted. Amelia Heckman and 40 other patients who were not included in the plea deal want the DA's office to reopen the case.
Your husband's campaign started with his Gmail list, right?
Yes.
Okay. And now he's raised millions of dollars. What do you make of this?
I think this is his passion coming through. Like he convinced me when he started talking about the solutions that he had for the country, and it's resonating. He's more than the free money guy. He's more than just the math guy, although he's always been very good at math.
I go to my wife and I say, hey, babe, I'm going to run for president. And her first question is, what are we going to do about healthcare? Let's pass universal healthcare in the next 10 seconds. See? Huh? We have this messed up system in the US where when we get sick or injured, we're more stressed out about paying for it or navigating our crazy bureaucracy than actually getting well. It's because we have a system that's designed not to maximize our health and well-being. It's a system designed to maximize revenue.
If you have a child with special needs, it's expensive. If you don't have access to good health care, families literally have nothing.
We need to move towards a Medicare for All system where every American has access to quality and affordable services and start supporting families in a real way.
Andrew Yang proposes setting prices for medical services and moving doctors to salaries rather than fees. He supports Medicare for all who want it, a public option.
As someone who has run a business, I know that our current healthcare system makes it harder to hire people, makes it harder to give them benefits and treat them as full-time employees. You instead pretend they're contractors. We have one of the only systems in the world where it's somehow tied to employment. It makes it harder to change jobs. It makes it harder to start a company. And so the question is, how do you separate healthcare from your employment situation? I am for a public option that's available to all Americans, but I would not do away with private insurance. There's a way to provide Medicare for all that does not prohibit private insurance. The goal has to be to demonstrate to the American people that this Medicare plan is superior to your current insurance without pulling the rug out from under you and saying that the insurance no longer exists. If you had come to me and said that I wasn't going to have to worry about my employees' health care anymore, I would have jumped for joy. Have you all noticed that your health care insurance costs always just go in one direction? Did you all know that the drug companies routinely charge us 2, 3, 4 times as much as they do citizens of other countries for the same drugs that we actually funded the development of? The truth, most FDA-approved drugs rely on research funded by the government. That means you paid for it. The old politics won't tell you that. I just did. You all know the healthcare industry prices are completely insane and out of whack and arbitrary. And then Americans are making terrible choices where they have to choose between their medications and food and shelter. One thing if we were all remarkably healthy as a result of all this expense, but we are not. We underperform by very basic measurements. And then when someone suggested, you know what, Medicare should actually try and negotiate lower prices than the American people, Congress blocked that rule because of lobbying from the drug companies. We have to break the stranglehold of the drug lobby and say, of course the American government can negotiate for lower prices. And I'm going to suggest to you all it's going to take a president like me who owes none of the drug companies or any of the lobbyists like a dime. Like, I don't care about any of that stuff. Drug companies have to charge us what they charge citizens of other countries. Sounds obvious. If you do not succeed, we, the government, have the right to forcibly appropriate the license to that drug. We will then manufacture your drug and you will lose hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue because you just couldn't resist sticking it to us. So what you have to do is you have to tie doing the right thing to the bottom line, then all of a sudden their behavior will change.
You also believe in free marriage counseling?
Yeah, the data shows that if you grow up in a two-parent household, certain outcomes are more likely. And so from a societal perspective, it makes perfect sense to try and keep couples together if they want to stay together.
You're in favor of a White House psychologist.
Yes. I would do away with those TV advertisements for drugs. There are only two countries that allow those advertisements, us and New Zealand. You need the drug, your doctor will tell you about the drug.
New tonight, legalizing pot. Andrew Yang referencing the iconic series Breaking Bad with the tweet you see there of him surrounded by drugs in a hazmat suit. He did it to highlight his support for legalizing marijuana.
We need to legalize weed as quickly as possible.
And I'm for full legalization, remove it from the federal controlled substance list. So my plan as president is on April 20th of 2021. I'm going to mass pardon everyone who's in jail for a nonviolent drug-related offense. I'm going to high-five them on the way out, and I'm going to be a very popular man that day.
When's the last time you smoked weed?
Past life. So in addition to decriminalizing marijuana, I would decriminalize opiates for personal use.
That's a big deal. I mean, does that include heroin?
Yes, it does. I was campaigning in Storm Lake, Iowa, and a high school senior came up to me and he told me something. He said that his classmates had fentanyl patches on their shoulders and they were already addicted to opiates. And he asked me, what can we do to get them help? And I realized that those teenagers would never seek treatment because it's an illegal substance. And this really stuck with me. So I looked into it and said, okay, what have other countries done in this situation? And some of them have had massive successes with decriminalization of opiates for personal use. We take the drugs away, yes, but then we refer you to treatment and not a prison cell. First, you have to get back all the blood money from Purdue Pharma and the other drug companies, take all the billions of dollars away and say this is going to be a down payment on treatment for our people to help them get stronger and better. We have to recognize this is a disease of capitalism run amok. You had more opiate prescriptions in the state of Ohio than people in the state of Ohio at one point, and that was on the government's watch. And then we somehow hold individuals accountable for becoming addicted when you had companies that profited to the tune of tens of billions of dollars. That company made $30 billion. They got a 2% fine, and they killed tens of thousands of Americans 8 an hour.
Do you think they need to go to jail?
I do. And then we need to open up safe consumption and safe injection sites around the country because they save lives. And when other countries have tried this, they've seen reductions in both use and abuse and overdoses.
Andrew Yang says the U.S. should loosen its ban on psychedelic mushrooms.
I'm Andrew Yang, and I approve whatever this was.
It's Andrew Yang here, and I am about to go on stage or a rap concert. They don't know I'm here.
I'm that. You got a lot of fans over there.
Thank you for the Yang Gang. Thank you. We'll see you soon.
Okay. There's that passion. All right.
One of the supporters who tattooed your face
on his calf. Yeah, you can't see that coming. But there's also.
Have you done that? No, and I said, Andrew, I think he loves you more than I do because I would never tattoo your face on my body.
Immediately you think, is that real? Right. And then you meet the person who's a military veteran, and oh yeah, it's real. This looks like a fucking revolution to me! And if you look at revolutions and successful campaigns throughout history, what do they
they can't get it. Because you can't buy it. You can't buy humanity. You can't buy passion. And when you do buy it, you can tell they bought it.
Yes, you can.
And everyone looks at it and be like, we know you bought that shit.
Yeah.
People are stopping you on the street. What are they usually asking you about?
Most of the time I get something like, Yang Gang, or like, hey, support you, or like, keep going. Someone called me the Asian Oprah because we've been giving 1,000 bucks. See, like that.
Just like that. Yeah.
Just like that. Yang Gang. You know he's in the Yang Gang.
How are you?
Not a plant.
Really
Not a plant.
Yang Gang.
Yang
2020.
Gang. Look at that.
Yang Gang, right?
Yang Gang.
Andrew Yang actually tweets me all the time.
He does?
A presidential candidate is tweeting me, so I hope he wins.
Okay, so you would vote for him?
I'd go for, Andrew. I vote for Andrew Yang.
Okay, really quick before I let you go.
I guess I'm part of the Yang Gang.
You're in the Yang Gang.
Are you a member of the Yang Gang? Yes, you are.
I am sticking with Yang. I believe I'm Yang Gang.
I think Andrew Yang is always strong. I'm not gonna lie. I think his numbers are solid. He has interesting
$1,000 a month is a solid number?
No, his numbers are solid. Like, he knows what he's talking about.
I think she likes Yang. When he
I love him.
David Arquette, I think he's cool, but he's probably a D-lister. Like, did you get above the D-list?
Wow, he's hating on David Arquette. I know. David Arquette's the man. Nick Cage is a donor. Rivers Cuomo of Weezer is doing a concert for us. I think I'm gonna go up there before the song's over, just to like rock out a little bit.
He called this Iowa gathering Yangapalooza. And the rain-soaked crowd knows his core message as well as their favorite songs.
Yourselves for a moment. How is a man you'd never heard of 8 months ago speaking after Joe Biden and before Elizabeth Warren?
I tell you how much it meant to me being up on that stage and hearing you all raining down cheers. And you could tell people in that crowd were like, whoa. That energy, like you could tell that it got a lot of wheels turning. The early mainstream needs the water to get a little warmer. They're saying, you know, that young guy's saying interesting stuff. They're saying that to their friends to see what the reaction is. That's right. And then when the reaction is positive, they'll be like, ooh, the water feels nice. And then one day they will look up and they'll say, you know what, I think I'm Yang Gang. And our friends are gonna be like, heck yeah, I'm Yang Gang too.
Classic R&B singer Anita Baker threw her support behind presidential candidate Andrew Yang.
Michelle Wolf, Ken Jeong, Terry Hatcher, Cameron Kasky.
You are the latest member of the Yang Gang.
Yes, I am.
All right, what is the deal? Do you need $1,000? What is it about Yang?
My son needs $1,000. He talked me into it. And I was like, yeah, son, you want that $1,000? I'll get it for you. I'm going to join the Yang Gang.
So my freedom dividend, which I heard Laura's son's excited about, which made me very, very happy.
I think every teenager is excited for that $1,000 a month.
My son's very excited because he just turned 18 and he's like, you know, Mom, it's very interesting, what Andrew Yang is talking about. I mean, $1,000 a month. Mom, you don't understand. Like, I want to start a brand, $1,000 a month. And he's right. It does mean he can start his
Right, that is his plan.
brand.
Donald Glover, a.k.a. Childish Gambino, has officially taken his pick for the 2020 presidential election, hinting at a pop-up event in Los Angeles on Thursday. The event will take place at 507 North Fairfax Ave at noon.
The line is going down, I think like down the block to the corner, and then you make a left and there's still more people down there.
The centerpiece of this pop-up shop and the centerpiece of the Yang campaign, the freedom dividend. That's $1,000 a month for every American.
Donald Glover, Childish Gambino, a hip-hop legend. There's something that's beginning to shift around you. How did you get Childish Gambino on the Yang Gang?
You stole my question. We talked about different ways to collaborate, and I am thrilled to be working with someone who sees the future as clearly as Donald does.
What's your favorite Childish Gambino song?
I love This Is America. Is it okay if I go say hey to the line outside?
No, but you can wait.
I'm going to be endorsed in about 2 hours by Dave Chappelle. And not just endorsed, Dave is going to be headlining a couple of shows to benefit the campaign.
That's a huge get. That's a huge get. That is one of the coolest celebrity endorsements I've ever seen.
He actually texted me right before I came on stage. He's excited about trying to pull the country together, and I'm thrilled that he's part of the Yang Gang. He may be one of the coolest members of the Yang Gang, which is very high praise because there are a lot of cool members, including my wife. He's a parent like me. He's concerned about the state of the country and the future.
Hi, I'm Chris Tucker.
I'm Jackie Chan.
I'm just kidding. I'm Dave Chappelle, and this is the guy I want to be president, Andrew Yang. $12,000 on the line.
A year. Forever.
My daughter is 10. Trump is her first white president. And she thinks the whites are doing a terrible job. I called a friend of mine after the first debates. I didn't see the debate. I said, who did you like? He said, I like the Chinese guy. I thought he was joking. And he told me about Andrew Yang. It was the first time I'd heard of him. Make some noise for the Politics Next Rocky, Andrew Yang. Dayton, Ohio has like a third of the people there living below the poverty line. If you were to take a poll in Dayton and say, what would you rather have, $12,000 a year or health insurance? Everyone's taking the money. Like health insurance is great, but groceries are necessary too. I started imagining what a universal basic income would do for my community, and it would save it almost instantly. I live in Dayton. I understand why this platform is formidable, and I'm supporting it. I really do think it's an important, Martin Luther King came up with a universal basic income. No one's ever run on this before. It's very exciting. I'm very inspired.
My name is David Chappelle. I'm a world famous comedian.
Thank you for your support. For me and for Yang. Yes, indeed. All right, Wu-Tang. You'll hear people say stuff like make America great again. Well, how about make America feel better again? And I think his platform handles a lot of the emotional content of what being an American is like.
Stop saying you're me, Dave. Come on, man.
I'm flying right from here to Iowa. I have a 17-day bus tour. Your friend Norm Macdonald is going to come rouse some Iowans.
He's one of the Yang Gang?
He is one of the Yang Gang.
How do you plan to improve America's failing education system?
So many things we can do. One thing you could do is invest in schools, which we should obviously do. We should pay teachers more. A good teacher is worth their weight in gold. The $12,000 a year raise would just be a start. But then when you look at the data, you find that 2/3 of our kids' educational outcomes are based on non-school factors like parental income, words read to the child, stress levels in the house. So if you were to put money into that family and household, you would actually be enhancing that child's ability to learn when they show up to school. We need to lighten up the emphasis on standardized tests, which do not measure anything fundamental about our character or human worth. That right now is making our teachers make these choices in the classroom where they know that it's not good for the kid, but they're like, well, I'm gonna get evaluated on this test, and the kid's gonna get evaluated on this test, so let's head to this direction. Get from someone who's really good at filling out bubble cards. Those tests do not measure anything except the ability to fill out bubble cards. You all know that we invented the SAT during World War II to identify which kids not to send to the front lines. That's the genesis of the SAT. And now we treat every year like it's wartime. Treating everything in high school like college preparation doesn't make sense. What would make more sense for them is teaching things that are broadly useful, like financial literacy and relationship skills. One proxy should be, if you can look it up on a smartphone, it should not necessarily be the main point of emphasis. You need to try and prepare kids for different kinds of paths instead of saying college, college, college. Technical, apprenticeship, vocational programs are very, very, very stable careers in many cases. There are many of those jobs that are going to stand the test of time. It's very hard to automate away a plumber or an HVAC repair person. Now, you said before Bernie's like free college for everyone. The problem with that solution is it pretends that college solves the employment problems of young people. If I say something like free college, only 33% of Americans are going to attend college. And if you already graduate from college because you're 24, 25, you look up and be like, oh, that stuff's free now. It doesn't really help you. But $1,000 a month helps everyone. And this is one reason why I'm so into the freedom dividend instead of something like free college. Because why would you subsidize something that only the top third of the population is going to use? The 6-year completion rate right now for college is only 59%. So 40%, 41% of the kids who are showing up aren't graduating in 6 years. And they also get the debt. How expensive is Georgetown nowadays? I heard 77, and that's crazy. How many of you owe student loan debt? I'm in the Bernie camp where we have to forgive a ton of that debt and free you all up. The things I'm proposing is like a 10 by 10 where if you commit 10% of your wages for 10 years, then you're debt free. Young people should be starting families, buying homes, starting businesses, and not paying off this phantom student loan debt. The schools at this point have long since forgotten about these loans because they got paid off already. This is just these financial companies that are holding the loans.
That's important for people to understand.
Nothing's going to stimulate the economy better than getting student loans off the backs of freaking young people. I owed $100,000 plus in student loan debt myself in the 2000s. I used to call it my mistress. And I was like paying off some phantom family in another town. I was like, I hope they're having a good time with my $900 a month. I hope they let me visit them sometime. That was probably someone inappropriate. Oh yeah, I was single at the time. You look up and you're like, okay, how did college get so freaking expensive? Has it gotten 2.5 times better? No, it has not. No offense, Claire.
None taken.
No.
My class accepted.
We're up to $1.5 trillion in student loan debt, up from less than $100 billion in 1999. Think about that growth. Less than $100 billion, up 15-fold in 20 years. And so when someone looks at that and says, you made the choice, it's your fault, I'd call bullshit on that. If you want your students to have access to federal loans, you have to bring your administrator to student ratio in line with what it was like in the 1990s. The schools would scream bloody murder. They'd be like, I can't do that, that's impossible. And you'd be like, well, I have a feeling you're gonna figure it out.
Fortunately this week, another school shooting. It's awful.
My beautiful 4-year-old daughter, Dayla, was struck by a stray bullet March 2011.
I have a 6 and 3-year-old boy, I was imagining. I was imagining it was one of them that got shot and the other saw it. I'm so sorry.
That was Andrew Yang, overwhelmed with emotion while hearing one victim's personal story.
I was just with my kids and I hugged them a little extra tight. It's just a human response, and this sort of phenomenon cannot be allowed to be possible in this country. My younger son's school had active shooter drills a number of weeks ago, and he's 4 years old. And I looked at the studies I could find and tried to find studies that said that active shooter drills make our kids safer, and I could not find any evidence that they do. I then tried to find evidence that the shooter drills make our kids anxious, concerned, stressed out, and confused, and I found a whole stack. I'm aligned with Democrats in terms of the big legislative goals. We need to have universal background checks and red flag laws and ban automatic weapons. But the reality is we have over 300 million firearms already in this country. About 1 for every man, woman, and child, and whatever law we pass, those firearms are still out there. We should follow the example of other countries and have essentially a perpetual gun buyback. I would also offer to upgrade everyone's guns to those signature guns where only you can fire them, turn everyone's gun into a James Bond gun.
Ooh, I like that.
And then we're safer because that gun goes to someone else and they can't fire it.
Yes.
A lot of gun owners would actually like that because it makes their gun more personalized. A lot of gun owners have children. They know their children get a hold of the gun, tragedies can occur. So if you were to make it cost-free, you would see hundreds of thousands of these guns become personalized and then much, much safer. And we also need to have licensing and an inventory system where if someone buys an arsenal, as the Las Vegas shooter does, you have to ask yourself, it's like, what is the legitimate purpose? When there's a shooting in this country, did you know the stocks of gun manufacturers actually go up? Because people buy more guns because they're afraid of regulation. This is called an externality, like this tragedy. So one of my proposals is to fine gun manufacturers when their guns are used in a mass shooting. And then the incentives would be reversed very quickly, because if my firearm, my product gets used in a mass shooting, then all of a sudden I get hit with a $10 million fine the next day. Then do you think I might be more open to some legislation that helps bring the casualty rate down? They're going to do what they think is in their financial best interest. We have to make it in their financial best interest to make us safer. And then we need to treat gun violence like a public health crisis and study it accordingly. I'm for trying to provide like more positive alternatives that move our society in the right way without pretending, frankly, that we can just regulate the heck out of everything.
You have had a bunch of white supremacists who just have decided somehow that you're their guy. So how does a President Andrew Yang deal with the issue of white supremacy in America?
Well, first, I was stunned to hear that anyone who has any kind of hateful ideology in their hearts would support me. As president, one of my top priorities would be to label white nationalist terrorism as its own category of terrorism and say, look, by the numbers, this is the most prevalent form of terrorism in the country today. And you can't fight something if you don't measure it. I talked to Christian Picciolini, who's now an anti-hate activist, who spent 12 years in a hate group. What he said to me was that if a coach or mentor or teacher had reached out to him instead of the hate group, then he never would have spent those 12 years in this lifestyle that now he completely rejects. What that looks like concretely is putting resources directly into our communities to be able to fuel positive role models, nonprofits, religious organizations.
While Yang raising over $16 million.
Hello, Yang Gang. Happy Thanksgiving, and thank you. Oh my gosh, we raised $2 million in a week. If anyone can do it, it's the Yang Gang.
He has raised $2 million in a week.
You just raised, in the last 3 months of 2019, $16+ million.
Yep.
Joining us from Poughkeepsie, New York, we're hearing the dogs barking. This is an extension of your Pledge for Humanity effort.
Well, our campaign slogan is humanity first, and we thought about ways we could actually demonstrate those values, decided to have a Pledge for Humanity, and I'm proud to say that over 3,000 hours of community service have been pledged, and they're taking place today.
Congrats on qualifying for the next debate, by the way. You will now be the only candidate of color on that debate stage.
He's the best we could get. We need more POC candidates.
It's both an honor and disappointment to be the lone candidate of color on the stage tonight.
Now, to be fair, the stage wasn't completely white tonight, thanks to Andrew Yang being there. So basically, it was a bunch of white people and then one Asian guy, like an adult reboot of the Goonies. And Andrew Yang had a really insightful take on why there weren't more people of color up on that stage.
The average net worth of a black household is only 10% that of a white household. For Latinos, it's 12%. And the question is, why am I the lone candidate of color on this stage? Fewer than 5% of Americans donate to political campaigns. You know what you need to donate to political campaigns? Disposable income.
Yeah, Andrew Yang makes a really, really great point. Think about it. To make it onto the debate stage, tonight's debate stage, candidates were required to have 200,000 donors. But if a candidate has supporters who can't afford to make donations, if they don't have disposable income, then that candidate can never make it to the stage. The whole issue around political donations in America is backwards. Candidates say to voters, give me money and I'll make your life better. And voters are like, yo, man, if I had money, I wouldn't need you to make my life better.
With respect, you can't regulate away racism with a whole patchwork of laws that are race-specific. What we have to do is heed the writings of Martin Luther King, whose birthday we just celebrated. He said that capitalism forgets that life is social, and what he was championing was a guaranteed minimum income that would end up reshaping our economy in communities of color, make it so that black net worth is not 10% of white net worth in this country, which is the most important number of them all.
All right, people. It's simple. If you want black people to like you, give them $1,000. It's been working for me since high school.
I thought it was certainly an upgrade from previous debates.
Okay, thank you. I wish we had more time, but we really appreciate it.
This is just like the debates. I'm just kidding. PBS is great. We did 10 hours, the 10-hour marathon. And this is extra credit. It's hour 11. We're going to do lightning round.
Quick lightning round.
My favorite chocolate is dark chocolate. I want to get rid of private prisons. You got to get rid of this punitive cash bail system. I'm a fan of the 4-day work week. Campaign team, this does not apply to you. I'm kidding. We're working longer work weeks than most of the rest of the world.
That's true, especially the Australians. They get a lot of time off, and I'm sick of it.
We should actually head in their direction, Jimmy. We got to bring our
we should, okay.
If you could be invisible, what would be the first thing you do?
Eavesdrop on the other candidates.
Okay.
If you get elected, will you tell us if aliens are real?
I will, unless it's just so scary.
Like public panic.
You are in favor of empowering MMA fighters.
Yes. MMA fighters get paid only 10 to 15% of the sport's revenues. In every other major sport, it's 50%.
Favorite book?
Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami. Favorite color is blue.
Red or white wine?
Red.
He had me with the getting rid of pennies. That was definitely, I am totally serious.
You seem like the candidate having the most fun.
You want to get rid of pennies.
I do want to get rid of pennies.
Did you start snapping?
Did you know it costs more than 1 cent to produce each penny? It's bad for the environment. We're spending $25 million on producing pennies more than they're worth. And who wants to get stuck behind that person in line? I don't.
You realize you just lost Illinois.
We can find another thing for Abe.
You want to revitalize malls.
What I want to do is I want to help these malls transition to new uses.
Yeah.
They can become theaters, community centers, places for religious organizations,
I say
even
no,
art
dude,
installations.
don't do boring religious stuff. Do this. Do skating rinks plus laser tag. Remember like when you were in...
Malls get spookier and more eerie as they empty out. They go from having a lot of positive value to actually being sources of blight.
What's your hottest pop culture take?
Be nice to the Game of Thrones people. They did their best.
Favorite TV show?
Right now it's This Is Us. I watch it with my wife. I met Mandy Moore at an event.
Last thing that you binge watched?
The last season of Stranger Things.
Movies.
Shawshank Redemption.
Favorite Disney movie?
Aladdin, the animated version, not this weird revamp.
I'm with you there. What is your favorite sport to play?
You know this, it's basketball for sure.
Right. Favorite athlete?
Michael Jordan's still the GOAT. Ted Cruz said yes to play me on one-on-one basketball, but now he's ducking me.
You don't...
But Ted, if you're watching this, you said yes online. Let's get it on, man. I owe you a beating. LeBron, if you're watching, let's work together.
Favorite sports team?
Brooklyn Nets.
No, my teams are terrible.
Jets?
It's Jets, Mets, Nets, I suppose you'd have to say now. I was a long-time Knicks fan for my entire life until they dumped Jeremy Lin, honestly. And then I was like, fuck this shit.
You could have one celebrity endorsement today.
Oprah or The Rock?
WWE pro wrestler.
Randy Moshman Savage.
You also came out against circumcision. Okay, what if somebody's, and again, asking for a friend, what if somebody's already had one? Can they have an extra $1,000 just to compensate?
Would you play Dungeons & Dragons in the White House?
I would for special occasions if there were kids around, because who doesn't love Dungeons & Dragons? I do support statehood for Washington, D.C. It's long overdue.
Do you actually run your Twitter?
It's me with a little plus sign next to it.
Favorite female artist?
Florence and the Machine.
Are you actually into the Dead Kennedys, or was it just a costume?
I'm an admirer of the Dead Kennedys, but I wasn't really that into them. They're a little bit before my time.
Okay.
I mean, the stuff like right after them, like I like the Pixies, yes.
But when you're driving around,
I'm a big 80s fan, so I like the Smiths and the Cure. Boy George just tweeted something nice about me. I was a big Culture Club guy.
Favorite song?
How Soon Is Now by the Smiths. I just love the Smiths.
Yesterday, Yang unveiled a Spotify playlist of his favorite jams, including such hits as Don't You Forget About Me. I'm sorry, that's actually his campaign slogan.
When Doves Cry by Prince, because it's awesome. I still miss you, Prince. How can you just leave me standing? Alone in a world that's so cold.
Best rapper of all time?
Jay-Z.
Allow me to reintroduce myself. My name is...
Humpty.
Pronounced with an umpty. All right.
You know, I think Kanye West has lost his way, honestly. And his music's not as good either. And maybe that's the biggest problem. Sorry, Kanye. Got to tell like it is, man. I believe I'll be able to ride my bike indefinitely, because it's very hard to intercept a bicyclist. And by the time someone recognizes me, which does happen on occasion, I'm already past them. I'll be biking forever, Ian.
You ever soak them in water?
The Kind Bars?
Yes. No, they're nuts.
No, I haven't done it. Does that improve them?
Soak your nuts in water. It really matters. All right.
Oh, he's a doctor.
If Donald Trump ordered 1,500 cheeseburgers for the World Series champions, and he ate 53 of those cheeseburgers while he's waiting for the team to show up, how many cheeseburgers will he have left for breakfast the next morning?
1,447.
That's absolutely correct.
Oh my God! I just want to give a shout out to that sign that says year-round daylight savings. When we switch back and forth by even that hour, it actually kills Americans, because you're actually a little screwed up, you drive worse, and then there's like a spike in accidents that day. How many of you knew that? Yeah. Why are we losing to the fossil fuel companies? Yeah. Why are we losing to the gun lobby and the NRA? And the answer is this. We all know, everyone on the stage knows, that our government has been overrun by money and corporate interests. Our political system is held captive by rich corporations and mega wealthy individuals, and like the average voter feels like my vote doesn't matter. My proposal is that we give every American 100 democracy dollars that can only be contributed to a political campaign. This would wash out the lobbyist cash by a factor of 8 to 1. I'm also for lowering the voting age to 16, Because if you're 16 years old, you can pay taxes, you should have a say in what goes on in our country.
Then all of a sudden you'd activate all of high school juniors. Every high school would become a political hotbed.
And studies have shown that the younger you are when you first vote, the more likely you are to vote throughout your entire lifetime. The primary counterargument to this is that 16-year-olds are not well informed enough and their brains aren't fully formed enough to be able to vote. To which I would say it's not like we're giving pop quizzes to people who are voting now.
They're called low information voters for a reason.
We should have ranked choice voting in this country so that people can actually vote the way they want and then not be worried about, quote unquote, wasting their vote. We should have Election Day be a national holiday. We should automatically register new voters to make it easier for people to register to vote instead of having these obstacles. Gerrymandering is a massive problem. Voters should be choosing politicians, not politicians choosing voters. We need to rebuild local journalism in this country because right now, almost 2,000 local papers have gone out of business over the last number of years because all of their advertising revenue went up to the cloud and you can't run a newspaper on that. 200 counties in this country don't have any local news source at all. It's very, very hard to have a functioning democracy if you don't have any local news. So we have to rebuild local news, and it turns out Americans actually trust local news more than they trust the big national media organizations. I'm happy to say I have found the secret, the loophole, as to how we can pass term limits in Congress. 12-year term limits for every member of Congress, but current lawmakers are exempt. Do you think they'll pass that the next day? They'd be like, we do this for the American people. I shouldn't be able to give speeches for money after I'm president because it's human nature for me to go easy on someone who can pay me a lot of money for a speech after I'm out of office. I have a couple of major reforms for the Supreme Court. Number one, we need to shift to 18-year terms instead of lifetime appointments. There is nothing in the Constitution that says the number of Supreme Court justices. I believe we should increase the number, with the argument being that this too would decrease the politicization of the court. So I would make tax day into a national holiday. I would call it Revenue Day. You should have your taxes filled out for you by AI. They could get 80% of Americans' taxes more or less right. And then you'd get a video showing where your money's going, government employees thanking you. And then you can choose where to send the last 1% of your money, being like, you know what, I really want to fund these programs. And then there'd be someone from that program being like, well, thank you for choosing this program. Then you'd get Oprah and Tom Hanks and The Rock in on this video. It's real, instead of treating tax day like this thankless chore that we all dread. Like,
Do you value women?
Of course I value women, and the way I would stand up for women is by making sure that reproductive rights are protected. And I'm on the record saying that I don't think a male legislator should have any say on women's reproductive rights or freedoms. We should leave the room. I do think that if guys got pregnant, we'd have very different conversations about this. There are only two countries in the world that don't have paid family leave for new moms: the United States of America and Papua New Guinea. That is the entire list, and we need to get off this list as soon as possible.
Would you push for explicit protections for LGBT Americans?
Yes, I would. They're more likely to be kicked out of the house, fired from a job, economically persecuted. And one of the things they said to me was that my flagship proposal, this freedom dividend, would help make members of the community more resilient. But the laws need to catch up in a huge way.
Do you support the Equality Act?
Oh, 100% yes. I grew up the lone Asian kid in my neighborhood. So I was called chink and gook and other things. Someone just yelled a racial epithet at me out of a car just the other day. As a result, I've always wanted to try and look out for the little guy or little gal. I'm Asian, so you know I like to work.
Yeah.
But
they're wooing you, and you did it on yourself. That's very politically correct.
I have certain concerns about certain policies that he has.
That Andrew Yang has?
Yeah.
I had an issue when you were like, oh, I'm Asian. I know a lot of doctors.
I mean, what's happening right now is pretty Asian. You're saying you're disappointed in him.
Yeah.
Look, I'll tell you what. If Yang wins, those two are definitely not getting their $1,000.
I think Americans are smart enough and savvy enough to know a joke when they hear it. I think if anything, by bringing these stereotypes into the light and poking fun at them, you're actually dispelling them and making them weaker.
Let me ask you about the China deal, not because you're Asian.
But this thing that happened with this guy from SNL who got hired and then fired over his racial slurs.
I first find out about it, and I'm personally included in some of his offensive remarks.
Yeah, he attacked you specifically.
First thing I did was I thought, who the heck is this guy? And then I sat down with my wife and actually watched some of Shane's comedy. I concluded that I did not think he was an evil person. I thought, well, if I think that he should not lose his job, then I should certainly say something about that. I think in this country we become excessively punitive and vindictive around statements that people find offensive. I think that cancel culture has really become sort of the source of fear for many Americans, where we live in a culture that you're somehow afraid that if you say the wrong thing that your life could be changed forever. 2 months later, we move on, but that person still doesn't have a job, or that person's life has still been changed irrevocably. Instead of being unduly punitive and vindictive, we should be a little bit more forgiving and understanding and try and humanize behaviors that in the abstract we'd find problematic.
Sometimes people want a president who will react, though. Get punched in the face, they might punch back.
Oh, if you punch me in the face, I'll punch back. That's for sure.
I'm not going to test that.
Immigration.
I'm the son of immigrants myself. I believe that immigrants make our country stronger and more dynamic, so we have to create a path forward. My father grew up on a peanut farm in Asia with no floor, and now his son is running for president. That is the immigration story that we have to be able to share with the American people. If you look at our history, almost half of Fortune 500 companies were founded by their immigrants or children of immigrants, and rates of business formation are much higher in immigrant communities.
What a talent that applies to being president.
I've got an above average memory. It would actually help me be a good commander-in-chief too, because I have a fairly good recall. I think Americans are looking for a commander-in-chief with the right temperament, judgment, and values. I would push the power to declare war back to Congress, where it belongs in our Constitution.
What is your threshold for military action?
Number one, there has to be a clear, vital American national interest at stake, or the ability to avert a humanitarian crisis. Number two, there needs to be a clearly defined timeline where we can bring our troops back. And number three, we need to have our friends and allies with us in the mission.
Do you think the drone strikes would also increase under President Yang?
You know, I do not.
Mr. Yang, if you win the 2020 election, what would you say in your first call with Russian President Vladimir Putin?
It's a fun moment. Well, first I'd say, I'm sorry I beat your guy. I think Russia is our greatest geopolitical threat because they've been hacking our democracy successfully, and they've been laughing their asses off about it for the last couple of years. Our foreign policy reflects what's happening at home. We were disintegrating. Our communities are falling apart. It got so bad that tens of millions of our fellow Americans decided to go for Trump. And now we have this erratic and unreliable foreign policy that's making our allies throw their hands up. I want to end endless wars, but I also want to let the world know that America's commitment is ironclad. We're going to live up to our international commitments. We're going to recommit to our partnerships and alliances, including NATO. And it was James Mattis that said that the more you invest in diplomats and diplomacy, the less you have to spend on ammunition. So the goal should be to spend more on diplomats. We have to rebuild here at home and then project a more reliable and sustained foreign policy. But I'm sure that our historic allies abroad are waiting with bated breath for a reasonable partner to get back into the White House and be able to live up to America's commitments.
Who would be our allies at this point? I mean,
yeah, exactly, unfortunately. The quote that struck me the most in the wake of the killing of General Soleimani was a UK official who said the purpose of having allies is so we can surprise our enemies, not each other. The true threats of the 21st century include cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, things that, frankly, we're going to need the government to play catch-up in technology and innovation, and that's what I bring to the table as Commander-in-Chief. We are 24 years behind on technology. I can say that with authority because we got rid of the Office of Technology Assessment in 1995. I guess they decided that everything had been invented by 1995. With the rate of change, you can't afford to be decades behind the curve. You might have been able to get away with that at earlier points in our history, but it's gone from being dangerous to disastrous very, very quickly. Right now, how do we all interact with cybersecurity? I am just like you. When you see that long, weird legal agreement with I agree or I consent at the bottom, we all just scroll through that thing and hit the button. I have a law degree and I'm not reading that shit. And then periodically there's some press release saying, hey, Yahoo's passwords were hacked. And then you're like, do I have to change my password? I actually want to ask you this, the first time I've asked any group this, what percentage of the time do you actually change your password when they tell you to? Raise your hand if it's like 30% or less.
I don't mean. I'm probably between the two of you, honestly. I should admit that because I'm like the tech presidential candidate. So it'd be like, he definitely changes his password 100% of the time. Now I'm a human being. I'm like, this account doesn't matter.
How many of you saw the study that just came out that said that our data is worth more than oil? Raise your hand to that. Now keep your hand up if you remember getting your data check in the mail. Did our checks get lost? They did not get lost. They went to the Amazon headquarters, the Google headquarters, the Facebook headquarters. Oh, they're getting our data checks to the tune of billions of dollars.
Our data is now worth more than oil. Think about that for a second. Our data is getting sold and resold over and over again, and we're none the wiser. We're not seeing a dime of it.
Which companies specifically? What are we talking about? The majors?
Facebook, Amazon, Google, the majors are selling our data and profiting to the tune of billions, even tens of billions of dollars. So I'm proposing that our data is ours, even if we decide to lend it to these tech companies. They have to tell us what they're doing with it. They have to share in the value with us. So we would literally get data checks from the tech companies. Wow. And then we have to be able to turn the dial off and unplug it at will. We're in a position where the tech companies know us better than some of our family members.
Yeah, that's true.
And they're putting all these...
That's very true.
It is true, right?
Yeah.
Netflix might too. But in Netflix, no. But in Netflix's
really?
case...
I told you to go after MSNBC. Now you're trying to fuck with my bag.
No. But in Netflix's case, they just figure out what we want to watch. So it's quite benign, actually. And then they figure out what sort of money to invest content in. I have a subscription.
Yours or like a cousin's?
Senator Warren is calling for companies like Facebook, Amazon, and Google to be broken up. Is she right? Does that need to happen?
As usual, Senator Warren is 100% right in diagnosing the problem. There are absolutely excesses in technology, and in some cases, having them divest parts of their business is the right move. But we also have to be realistic that competition doesn't solve all of the problems. It's not like any of us wants to use the fourth best navigation app. There's a reason why no one is using Bing today. Sorry, Microsoft, it's true. The mental health crisis we're seeing among young people right now, anxiety, depression, antisocial impulses, spiked when we got smartphones and social media apps into teenagers' hands. But when I was 12 years old, if I went home and closed the door, I felt like I was alone. Today, if you're 12, you close the door, you feel like your classmates are still in the room with you because you can take out your phone and see what they're talking about and saying at every moment. You know who doesn't let their kids use these social media apps and smartphones? The folks in Silicon Valley who made millions of dollars off of them. We also do need to get into the guts of these social media apps and let these companies know that the mental health of our kids are more important than their profits. And when I've sat with the technologists in Silicon Valley, some of them said something to me that you would not expect. They said we actually need government regulation and government input on this because we're making these decisions that we should not be making.
One candidate who was not on that debate stage last night, but who was trending worldwide.
I missed you at the debate.
You weren't the only one.
I did.
But in lieu of that, we've got the Daily Show Alternative Asian Debate. Will you promise to shut down Panda Express?
I will affirmatively profess my love and support for Panda Express.
What?
America needs Yang. I saw that across my Twitter feed, but we didn't see you on the debate stage. What wasn't said that you would have?
What was missed last night, Stephanie, was a real positive vision with actual tangible solutions that Americans know would improve our lives. Instead, it was a lot of back and forth around issues that, frankly, most Democrats agree on fundamentally.
If you had watched any of the Democratic debate, you'd think someone drugged your food. You'd find more signs of life on the moon.
And it just felt like a big bowl of cold oatmeal. I missed Andrew Yang tonight.
And the Dems should be worried. Without original thinkers like Yang or Tulsi, those on stage seem bored by their own words.
I came away feeling worried for the Democratic Party.
Why weren't you in the debate?
They haven't been running many polls, in part because of the holidays. So it's very difficult to have a higher threshold when there aren't that many polls out in the field.
Well, there's no better opportunity than right here, right now. So let me ask
you. Will you commit now to not ordering Panda Express at the inauguration?
No, I cannot make that commitment.
Wow.
As last night, maybe for the first time, we started to hear other candidates talk about the economic issues that you've been talking about from the beginning.
Are you worried that because you're polling higher, that as other candidates
get desperate, they'll start offering $1,100 a month.
Well, that would be a version of victory, Seth. I've said for a while that I'm either going to win or the other candidates are going to sound a lot like me.
Oh, well, that's a very good way of looking at it.
We're in the middle of what I'd call, other people call, the fourth industrial revolution.
There's an experiment going on right now in the city of Stockton with what's called universal basic income.
I agree with my friend Andrew Yang. I think universal basic income is a good idea.
We're not going to have a shortage of MBAs. We're going to have a shortage of plumbers.
Well, Elizabeth Warren said she's halfway through my book, which I was like, awesome.
This could actually happen. What is the path?
It's happening. Yeah. People sense that I'm a different sort of campaign, and that's why the energy feels so human. What they say is, you don't sound like any other politician, and this is what we need. I got the highest compliment of my campaign from a black woman in Detroit. She said to me, Andrew, black people can smell bullshit a mile away. And you don't stink. This isn't just me speculating. If you look at the numbers, we have the highest enthusiasm rate for any candidate in this race. When people decide they're going to vote for Andrew Yang, they're not going anywhere.
So because this is the math campaign, I'm going to break down some fun numbers for you all. I'm here with you tonight, one of only 2 candidates in the field that 10% or more of Donald Trump voters say they will support, which means that when I am the nominee, we win the whole thing.
I'm the 3-2 favorite. Everyone else, including Bernie, is at best even money. A survey just came out that said I'm among the least disappointing candidates in the field.
Really?
Yeah.
The latest Emerson poll takes a look at head-to-heads against President Trump. Andrew Yang defeating Trump by 8 points.
He's the only candidate with a net favorability amongst Democrats and Republicans.
One poll said that 10% of New Hampshire Trump voters would vote for me over Trump in the general. Another survey said that 18% of college Republicans would choose me over Trump.
42% of people who support him would not consider voting for anybody else.
One person said, you're actually what I hoped for when I voted for Donald Trump.
Wow.
I voted for Trump in 16, and honestly, I'll probably vote for him again if Yang doesn't make it through.
I'm one of those registered Republicans. Went for Trump last time. Truck driver, put me down as another one in that category.
Why would you be turning on him?
I don't think he's fit to be commander-in-chief. Last night during his bedtime prayers, he asked me for dirt on Joe Biden. No dice. Yeah, no way. This time I'm voting for Andrew Yang. I really need that $1,000. That's the sound of the Lord voting for the Yang gang.
And what is the #1 criteria that Democratic primary voters have for the nominee? Beating Donald Trump, that's right. Andrew Yang can beat Donald Trump. Yeah, there are a couple of chants going on. I think Yang beats Trump took over. It's like a game of rock, paper, scissors. And if Donald Trump's the scissors, I'm the fucking rock. Because he knows his attacks work on politicians, and his fear was that a new non-politician that is not full of shit comes out of nowhere.
One of his advisors was quoted in a meeting that was caught on film saying the candidate they're most worried about is Andrew Yang.
Yang2020. But in an era where a so-called meme army helped President Trump win, being an online megastar could still count for something.
Donald Trump hasn't messed with me online because he knows I'm actually better at the internet than he is.
This is the best the Dems could come up with. Pocahontas, Sleepy Joe. I'm just gonna riff some new names I came up with. Mayor Butt. Klobuchar. That's good, Klobuchar. Yeah. Scrooge McDuck, Ben and Jerry's, and Andrew Yang works as his.
Okay. We've been hypothesizing as to what his nickname for me would be, and we came up with Comrade Yang because it's a little racist, it's a little communist.
What's your biggest fear?
That we don't eradicate poverty in the time we have. My biggest fear is that we continue to play I lose, you lose, I lose, you lose with our politics. Meanwhile, the people lose. Our communities lose, our families lose.
You're not the traditional candidate. You made it farther than a lot of the traditional candidates have. Why do you think that is?
We've had a clear message from day one, Katie, that we need to solve the problems that got Trump elected. I think we've done well because we've had that message the whole time, and we've been talking to American voters in a different language, a language of data and solutions, as opposed to political talking points.
Certainly the most interesting person running for president.
Andrew Yang knows America is being invaded by robots. They're sneaking across the border, taking the jobs we love. Andrew Yang will stop the robots from banging your wife and becoming your son's new dad. Yang 2020.
What do you think?
Andrew Yang 2020, get high, go to the mall, keep your foreskin, I'll give you money. That is how he might win.
Yang 2020. The robots. Them to hell.
I'm Andrew Yang, and I approve this message.
Andrew Yang, parent, patriot, not a politician. A new leader who understands that what's coming is the greatest economic transformation in history and who can lead us in the fight for the future that we want. For President Andrew Yang, a new way forward.
I'm Andrew Yang, and I approve this message.
Let's make America think harder and move this country forward on Tuesday. Let's give our kids a future we will actually be proud to leave to them.
God, he has changed. His personality has changed a lot. Look at him there.
He had amazing energy. I don't know if you guys saw, he was literally bouncing out the door and down the hall.
I really thought that when Andrew Yang came out on stage at 10 o'clock at night, he brought an energy, and you could feel the energy in this room.
Hey, man, you got the swaggers. I've seen it. It's up now.
Oh, thank you, man.
You hopped up like you had wheelies, man.
Let's see Bernie Sanders do that.
Oh, wow. Shots fired.
I said, he won the night. He may have not won any votes, but Andrew Yang won the night. And if I owned any company in the world, I would try to hire him. I would have no idea what to do with him, but I know that he would make my company better.
He looks like what I think leaders will start looking like. Because he's got that kind of tech thing, like I want to buy something from him.
Right.
I think you have some very interesting ideas. I don't think you're going to be president, but maybe, I mean, no offense, but maybe you will. Who knows? I mean, I didn't think Donald Trump was going to be president either.
I see you're wearing your math pin.
Yes.
Did you offer some help with math to the Democrats in Iowa this past week?
Oh my gosh.
Oh, the issue in Iowa was math? Oh, I wonder who they could have called to help them out with that. No, what? I meant because of my pin, racist.
You campaigned really hard in Iowa.
Well, thanks for noticing that.
You didn't.
What do you think your problem has been up to this point in not getting more traction?
Well, certainly with a crystal ball, we might not have invested as much energy in Iowa because I think that lack of clarity afterwards hurt every candidate, and we put a lot of energy there.
You've held 151 events here and spent $5 million in ads, and yet, in the latest Real Clear Politics average of polls in this state, you're running 6th.
How many of you are here because you saw a TV advertisement? That would be exciting. Good, because we spent a lot of money on those ads. I love Iowa. Campaigning here the last 2 years has been the journey of my life. I'm really glad that you all are going to determine the future of our country.
Is this a really dire situation we're talking about?
Well, you can see the energy here in New Hampshire is rising. The crowds are bigger and more enthusiastic than ever. We think we're positioned to have a great night tomorrow night right here in New Hampshire.
I like that you have learned how to duck questions in your young political career. Are you really in dire straits with fundraising? Could tomorrow really be the end for you?
The New Hampshire primary gave life to Bernie, Pete, and Amy Klobuchar. But while the New Hampshire giveth, it also taketh away.
His campaign just told us that he is dropping out tonight.
We did see the suspension or termination of presidential campaigns by Andrew Yang and Senator Michael Bennet.
All right, Andrew Yang making it official. He is out.
We do a Fox News alert. Andrew Yang dropping out. We're going to go to him live.
I am the math guy, and it is clear tonight from the numbers that we are not going to win this race. So tonight I am announcing I am suspending my campaign for president. Thank you. I love you too. Thank you, New Hampshire.
And the robots have come for him. So long, Mr. Yang. And Michael Bennett, get out of there!
I wanted to take a moment to pour one out for Andrew Yang, who ended his presidential campaign last night. In fact, his supporters were so dedicated that they actually won our totally unrigged primary game and received $50,000 for Yang mere days before he ended his campaign. Which brings me to my next question. Where's that money, Andrew?
The other dropout was tech entrepreneur and man specifying that he wants his food prepared by a chef who hasn't even handled cilantro. Andrew Yang, which means Yang's now out of a job. You know what he could use? $1,000 a month.
Now the only way to get $1,000 from a Democratic candidate is to go through Bloomberg's couch cushions.
It is bitterly disappointing for many of us, but it shouldn't be. Every single day I've been campaigning, I've had supporters say to me, your campaign helped me out of a depression. Working on this campaign has made me a better person. I met my significant other because of you. Your campaign brought my family together. Your campaign got me excited about politics for the first time.
But even though he's gone, Andrew Yang did leave a lasting impression on the 2020 race. Right? His plan for universal basic income made a big splash.
Many, many Americans, a majority of young voters, a majority of people in Iowa, actually support universal basic income. 5 Democratic candidates came out and said they would support it or are open to exploring it. I believe this campaign has helped accelerate the end of poverty in our country by years, maybe even generations, and that's something that's going to stand the test of time.
I think from a decade point of view, he may be one of the most consequential voices because he's introducing all these new ideas and this new language.
I think, you have a different voice and a voice that needs to be heard.
You are talking about things in ways that we are not used to hearing in our politics, Democratic or Republican.
Good guy, personally, and a serious person talking about things that actually matter and will matter 20 years from now, unlike so many running.
The only guy in the race I've never heard anyone trash. And that is a rare credential these days, wow. Mr. Yang.
Did you see this playing out the way you have? Because no one knew who you were in early 2019.
Yeah, that's accurate. So this was the high end of the scenarios that I'd mapped out for myself. Okay. A lot of people who said if there wasn't so much fear and anxiety, they would have come our way. But because of the current climate, I think many people felt like it was a little bit new.
You should all know that I fully expected to run until the last dog died. I was going to stay in the entire primary season. And it was only after some people I like and trust came to me and said, hey, if you want to maximize the potential of this movement, you're actually better served with a different timing structure. If we drop now, then we can continue to build a movement in different ways.
Here's the question. What is this the beginning of?
I'm not going away. The Yang Gang's not going away. So the plan is to keep on pushing the ideas of this campaign across the finish line. This is not an ending. This is a beginning. While we did not win this election, we are just getting started.
We're just getting started. What does that mean?
So my campaign officially suspended, and I will say I'm on the ballot of something like 40-something states, so I think I'm going to still get a lot of votes. I'm going to be in the public eye very much over the coming days and weeks, and the goal is to keep advancing and then potentially run again.
New CNN political commentator Andrew Yang makes his debut on Anderson Cooper 360. Live next.
We have more breaking news. The Wall Street Journal is reporting tonight that Michael Bloomberg's campaign has reached out to former Democratic presidential candidate Andrew Yang, courting his endorsement and floating the possibility of Yang being his running mate. If only we had Andrew Yang here. Oh, hi, Andrew Yang.
Hey, Anderson, how are you?
Hey, Andrew is now a CNN political commentator.
Multiple campaigns have reached out.
Everyone from Barack Obama called. And there's a little bit where the fuck were you?
Have you thought about endorsing anyone?
Joe called me a couple days ago. I've said I want to have the democratic process play out. Mm-hmm. I've publicly said a couple of things. Number one, I will support whoever the nominee is. But also, if someone decides to support the ideas that were central to my campaign, that would go a long way towards making me consider an endorsement.
If you were asked to be vice president, would you accept that role?
I'm here to help solve the problems that affect us all that we're leaving for our kids. If that's as president, great. If that's in some other capacity, also great, because we all need to do more to help build.
Yeah.
That answer is an answer I have never
ever
heard.
Yeah.
My eyeballs are popping out.
I would have to think about it, but it would have to be a conversation.
Fair enough.
Joe Biden asked you to be his running mate. Would you do it?
I certainly think I could help Joe in that he doesn't appeal to young people as strongly as perhaps he could. And last week I said that some other candidate should pull an Andrew Yang. And what I meant by that is make a rational, principled decision about whether they should be in the race based on three things. Number one, can you win? Number two, are you helping your cause by staying? And number three, are you helping defeat Donald Trump by staying? If you get out, it's not terrible not having a camera in your face 24/7. Your families will be happy to see you. And you've missed a lot of good TV and movies.
I didn't see a path to winning that I'd suspend my campaign.
Billionaire oligarch Mike Bloomberg has decided to drop out.
Elizabeth Warren has dropped out of the race. And, you know, it's now, you know, two old white guys. Two old white guys.
In their late 70s, and the president is 73. He's the youngster.
Yeah, it's not ideal on a couple levels. Certainly, I know that Joe and Bernie want to help push the country in the right direction, but I'm not sure necessarily if they understand some of the realities that Americans are dealing with that might have changed, frankly, since they came of age. I am in the green room of the View. I'm going to prove it. What does it say? I think it's backwards, thanks to the magic of technology.
Maybe the entire election. Look at all the Andrew Yang people. Look at your cult following. Look at these people.
Yes.
Were you this popular when you were running?
Yes.
I don't know how you're not president. I mean, this entire room, no other candidate had this. Just saying.
It's just Iowa. It's just Iowa.
And what's this I heard you wanted to run for mayor of New York?
We're looking at the New York mayoral race, but it's one of several things we're looking at. I'm more attracted to executive roles than I am legislative roles, but I'm going to make an announcement today on the show.
You want to do that now?
Yeah, sure, I can do that right now. Fantastic. So I am thrilled to announce that today we are launching a new nonprofit called Humanity Forward. Well, our goal is to champion the ideas of my campaign around the future of work, universal basic income, a human-centered economy, and the fact that our data should be ours even if we lend it to the technology companies. We already have pledges of $3 million that we're going to give away to everyday Americans around the country in the days ahead. But the...
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's really good, right? Same cause, same people, same fight, just like different evolutionary stage. The goal is to build a movement. And so this is going to be a grassroots campaign or organization in the months ahead. And one person who supports Humanity Forward in the month of March will get $1,000 a month for a full year. This is the second iteration, but we have some big plans ahead on top of this. So stay tuned, Yang Yang. Love you. Appreciate the heck out of you.
It has been a pleasure having you on.
Thank you. I'm coming down.
Andrew Yang, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Andrew.
I'll come back this way.
Andrew Yang, I like you, sir.
Oh, thank you, man. I like you, too.
I like you.
Peace.
Peace.
Boom!
Bye!